everyone. Welcome to the What is True podcast. I'm joined today by a full house of the Apollo detectives. What is going on, gentlemen? Thanks for coming back on. Mr. Marcus Allen, we did a fabulous show last weekend. It was a blast. And then we have Mr. Jared White. We have Scott. And we have Mr. Bob joining us tonight. If you guys want to introduce and maybe give a little brief background on each of, and one of y'all, we could probably get started that way. Who would like to go first? Marcus is pointing to the little yellow thing.
So what would you like us to talk about? Ourselves?
Yeah, if you just want to give a tiny little bit of background, maybe even what got you interested into, the whole.
What got me interested was watching a few programs, some videos back in the early 2000s, and one of them, of course, was Marcus Allen with an entire group with David Percy and Mary Bennett and that discussing it. And of course, up until that point, of course, I was like everybody else. I just believed that we landed on the moon. You never think twice about it, right? And some of those things gave me enough curiosity to look into it for myself. I wanted to find out for sure, how could this possibly be that there'd be a question on whether we landed on the moon? And I've always been an avid space enthusiast, and when they made documentation available in the late 90s online at the like what NASA put up right on their journal site, I was reading all of those beautiful PDF files on all the details and equipment and everything else on there, and it all made sense if you just read it just the way it is. But if you look at it closely, they have all of these problems that were not resolved. Every one of the PDFs has said we did this successful, or we're trying this, or we're building this, and it doesn't work, right? But you cannot find a PDF file that resolves those problems when you start looking at it. Like if they had a problem with this, there's no result, right? There's no further testing, right? And in some of the documents, they just simply just lowered the standard of testing because, of course, if you're testing in vacuum, you cannot replicate the space environment itself. That in itself gives you even more curiosity. And by the mid 2000s, I started diving into the photographs with all of the anomalies and spent a few years and didn't find too much. And then when I found a few things, it really started to make sense. If you study them long enough, if you study the photographs long enough, you realize the set that you are on. You know exactly where you are on this set, where that camera is being placed, what you're looking at. And if you realize that the astronauts themselves, or the people behind the camera, were giving you clues, like there are no random photographs in there. If you think it's just repeating a scene over and over and over again, if you look through that sequence, you will see something is now either appeared and then missing again in a series of photographs going through, right? And you become the person behind the camera when you're now viewing the photographs. I have a photograph up right now. I know exactly what direction, everything else. If you pull a photograph up of any of them, I can tell you what mission, what EVA that it was taken on, because that's how much time I've spent looking at these photographs. If somebody simply displays a photograph, I'll be able to, like, especially if they're messed with, if they've been messing around with the photograph, I know that I can see instantly that they have altered the photograph in some way, and I can very quickly refer to my files because I have all of the photographs, and I can find that photograph and know exactly what I'm looking at to see what's been altered on the documents and stuff like that. And NASA is the one that's doing most of the modifications, especially when we're looking at the last one we were looking at, that Marcus and I were doing, and Robert, was a panoramic where they actually shrunk. And I very quickly pulled the series of photographs the panoramic was made up of and showed exactly what was there and showed which ones that they had altered to make that panoramic. And it completely alters the concept, or that panoramic view has been modified to suit NASA. Okay, not actually what's in those photographs. And that itself is a deception. But any of the photographs that they have on the journal site, they haven't actually altered yet. I've been waiting for them to alter the ones that we have posted or put videos up on, particularly the wet flag. They haven't altered it yet. But when they're using it now in media, they bleed everything out so you can't see it anymore. If it's on any other media sites, they're blurring it out. But what's on the original site is still there. So that's what I do. That's why I'm interested. Okay. And,
that's awesome.
Like, we're looking for the truth. What is the truth? Okay.
That's exactly it.
How capable are we in space travel, especially human space travel? Okay.
Exactly. I guess I'll go next. I assume Marcus was pointing to me, giving me the go-ahead to introduce myself. Yes, there's a thumbs up. Well, I grew up as a huge fan of space exploration and astronomy in general, and for the longest time, I was of the mindset that we had gone to the moon and that we would soon be putting bases on the moon and trips to Mars and the like. In fact, I got something special I want to show you right now. Here is one of my childhood books. Okay. In this book, they were touting that we would be having manned missions to Mars by as early as, what was the date? 2019. I'm still waiting for those missions to Mars. Obviously, they haven't happened around. And it was during my teenage years that I first learned of the moon landing hoax. I had learned of the work of Bill Kaysing and Ralph Renee. Okay, and that. At first I took it with a grain of salt, okay, this is interesting. Is there any merit to it? And so I went back to everything I had learned previously about space, about space exploration. And of course, along the way, I came across many, many books and websites and articles and whatnot trying to debunk the Apollo hoax theory. But as I was reading through all this information, I tracked down all the source materials, all the references that Renee and Kaysing had. I looked into all the photographs. I looked up into the stock footage and whatnot. Anyways, as I was reading through all these pro-Apollo websites, it quickly became apparent to me that they weren't so much trying to debunk the conspiracy theory, but rather manipulate the reader into coming to the wrong conclusions. They would often resort to misrepresenting the opponent's position. They would resort to half-truths. They would give false information and even character assassination. They would say things like, Kaysing, he left Rocketdyne before they started work on Apollo. No, they began work on the engines, literally when he first joined in the 50s. They continued well into the 60s, and they had all these programs underway to try and rectify these issues with varying degrees of success. And Casing was well aware of all these problems that were going on, and he was, he would worked at the Rocketdyne facility, and he was the first one to speak out about the Apollo moon landing hoax. And I was so, especially after Casing died, when he was trolled constantly by as I came to call them, propagandists. All these dubious pro-NASA websites, they were run by propagandists. That's the only word I can describe for them. I was so pissed by the way they danced in his grave, so to speak, that I went through all the trouble of writing a counter arguments against these people. I went through all their different websites. I wrote an enormous essay which counted each of them point by point, and by the time I was finished, it was about the size of a phone book. Okay, and so at this point, I felt, okay, maybe I need to present this in a different manner, because first of all, it was very, very lengthy, and secondly, I was a lot more wild back then, for lack of a better word. I would get really, when I was pissed, I would let people know about it. I was very, very not afraid to show my anger, and so I went as I was going through the stuff, trying to tone down some of my harsher statements, and think, okay, what should I do with this? What should I do with that? And then I figured, I'd done my film and TV course, so why didn't I make it a video series? And that's kind of how Moonfaker came about. So I've produced well over 100 videos in the Moonfaker series. I also produced the Gem trilogy, which was Apollo 11, The Little Gem, which basically took their favorite piece of footage that they always loved to flog out of context and showed how it doesn't really prove that astronauts are going to the moon at all. And then there was Flagging the Gems, which proved the Apollo 10 telecasts were all pre-filmed and edited together. And then there was Apollo 8, Better 8 Than Never, which discussed the Apollo 8 telecasts and some other anomalies in that regard. And anyways, when I released my Flagging the Gems video, Mark Gray of Spacecraft Films, he actually filed DMCA copyright infringement takedowns on the video to have my original YouTube account suspended. I got the takedowns removed, but they still didn't reinstate the account. And so, yeah, and this is public domain footage, I might add. And so that just, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger, I think.
There you go. Yeah, interesting times that we're living all around. Mr. Marcus Allen needs very little introduction, as we did a show last week, and he is the legend. But if you've got anything you'd like to add, Mr. Allen, by all means, take the floor.
I will indeed. I always got something to add. Can't shut me up. That's the problem.
Love it.
The videos that Jara mentioned on moonfaker.com are probably the most impressive selection of films about the faking of Apollo, the various aspects of Apollo which are still being questioned. And I first got involved in this Apollo, is Apollo fake question, about 30 years ago. So I've had a bit of time to look at these things. I was trained as a photographer in London in the 1960s, and all the stories about London in the 1960s are true, if you can remember it. So I was familiar with what cameras can and cannot do, because this is an important distinction which must be made and clearly understood. The Apollo photographs that we see, the 5,771 that were taken on the lunar surface, were all taken with film cameras, not digital cameras. They hadn't been invented at the time of Apollo. The first digital camera arrived in about 1975. So they were all film cameras. And film cameras are very good at recording information, but the film itself can be affected by the conditions on the lunar surface, not just the radiation. That will affect film because that's what film is designed to do, is to record radiation. We call it the visible light spectrum, and it records it very well. But there's many other types of radiation around the moon. Forget the Van Allen radiation belts, that's just around Earth. When you get beyond the Van Allen belts, you're in space and you're in radiation all the way to the moon and back again. So I thought, okay, let's have a look at the photographs, just see how they record things. And the more I looked at the photographs, the more I reckoned that there were major problems. We'll come to the big problem to do with the photographs just in a minute or two. But many of the photographs appeared to show scenes which photographic film cannot record accurately. Specifically, when you have an object like an astronaut in the shadow of the lunar module, specifically Buzz Aldrin climbing down the ladder, being photographed by Neil Armstrong, there's a series of 8 photographs which show Buzz Aldrin in the doorway in a very strange position, because he's, if you know the layout of the lunar module, you'll know that he couldn't be in that position. There is a 10-inch wide shelf of instruments above him, so he couldn't be in that position. Then he comes out and you see him illuminated, lit up like a Christmas tree, I always describe it. Where's that light coming from? It's not earthshine, because the Earth is more or less directly overhead at that point. It's not a reflection off the lunar surface, because the shadow of the lander is basically stopping any light being reflected anywhere. It's a light source close to the photographer, probably a flash gun, but they didn't carry flash guns. So you've got all these anomalies to do with the photographs. And unless you know what you're looking for, unless you know how you can identify the problems, you'll assume that they were taken on the moon by the named astronauts. That's an assumption, it's not a fact. The fact is the photographs have been seriously manipulated. They were more likely taken, well, in fact, they were certainly taken here on Earth under controlled studio conditions, probably at Cannon Air Force Base, where Apollo 11 was initially set up to be filmed and photographed in the presence of President Johnson, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, many of the senior personnel from NASA, including James Van Allen, who's after whom the radiation belts are named. So once you start digging into it, which we've been doing for many years now, some people might say it's a waste of a life to do that, because of course they were not faked. It'd be harder to fake them than it would to go there. That's the normal expression. Until you start digging into it, which we've been doing. We've identified enough things to be able to claim quite definitively that no human has landed on the lunar surface and returned to Earth. He'd be dead before he got back to Earth. And the major problem is the level of vacuum on the moon or near to the moon. It's a very hard vacuum. Vacuum has an effect on photographic film, which we have established by doing an experiment using a vacuum chamber that didn't produce as much level of vacuum as there is on the moon. We've had it confirmed by professionals at universities in Greece who say, yeah, that's what vacuum does. It outgasses any object put into a vacuum. Outgassing, put a bowl of water into a vacuum chamber and it starts to boil. That's outgassing. Photographic film outgasses. We've demonstrated that. So photographic film outgasses. What is the effect on the film? The film cannot record accurately the information in front of it. It is seriously damaged by the vacuum. The color balance of the film is destroyed. If the vacuum is hard enough, the film will become so brittle, it will break inside a camera, like the Hasselblad camera we're told was used. So we can now state, or I can now state, with a degree of certainty that no human has ever landed on the lunar surface and returned to Earth. And if anyone can prove me wrong on that, I want to hear about it. I ask that question every time I make the statement, prove me wrong. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll happen tonight.
You got to do this, Marcus. Come on. Come get some.
Yeah, come on.
Bring it.
Come on. I'm thinking.
I'd like to add something to what Marcus said, because what he brought up about the astronaut Buzz Aldrin descending into the lemon shadow and still being lit up, that highlights one example of disinformation by the pro-NASA side that I've had to debunk over the past years. You might remember there was that. In fact, I think we actually discussed this the last time I was on your show, Weezy. It might have been the previous session. But anyways, they had the Mythbusters did a program where they tried to debunk the Apollo hoax theory, and they created scale models of the LEM and had little toy astronauts and the like. And to recreate the lunar surface, they used Portland cement and charcoal powder. Already there's a red flag going off there, because Portland cement has a reflectivity of about 90%. Okay, so that means all the light that hits it, 90% of it's getting reflected. All right, and so they claimed that they used a light meter to determine that the soil had about 8% reflectivity, about the same as the moon. But they never actually showed us what the light meter said. Instead, they just show, I think it was Hyman. They showed pictures of Hyman playing around with the light meter, measuring the intensity and whatnot. And then they cut to a shot of one of them, either Savage or Hyman, basically punching 0.08 into a calculator. Like what? Why not show us the readouts on the actual light meter? No, they I just type it into a calculator. Oh yeah, we got 8%. That's, yeah, take my word for it. That's basically their level of logic their level of proof that they presented. And so it's my belief that they were using much brighter material than the moon, and they tried to deceptively pass it off as being the same reflectivity.
Yeah, that's the mistake that NVIDIA made when they produced their debunk of the moon landing deniers. Interesting. Exactly. There was a question asked by Jim Schultz earlier about the book, which I have co-written with Trevor Weaver, The Apollo Moon Hoax, The Real Evidence. This is a summary of all the objections people put forward to what we talk about and why they're wrong. So we've got, Jim wants to know if there are any signed copies of that book. Well, you can get signed copies from me. Just go on to nexusmagazine.com and find the contact button, and you'll be able to contact me or get information sent to me. I can send you a signed copy of the book. I mean, you've got to pay for it, obviously, because, you know, these aren't cheap. These aren't just to be given away. It's valuable information, guys. Okay, I'll certainly sign a copy if you ask me. Okay, Jim,
get me one of those.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. So as I put these questions, I'm just putting the ones that stand out. I'm putting them on the screen. If at any point any of you gentlemen want to answer, pick one up and answer it, by all means, take the floor. So I'm just putting them up, but just stop me. If hey, I want to tackle that one, just like Marcus did just now. So,
well, I'll tell you what, Wheezy, what I'd like to do is show people this little flag problem. It's just a teaser. It's a teaser to what the video coming out is going to be. But I'm not going to give that real good part away. I want to wait till the video comes. But this is what I would like to show if I could share the screen here.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. We'll just go up to this. And I guess we should, there we go. So we should be right there. So this is the problem I have. So how many days do you all think that it would take? Or let's go back and ask the question again. How many hours do you think it would take for this flag's shadow to move from one side to the other? And I do mean from one side to the other. Now think about that. Yeah, think about that while I run this little clip. Here they are. They've just finished planting the flag. Okay. No, whoops. Whoa, wait a minute. Now look at the flag shadow. It's on the other side. So I don't quite understand how this is possible when I could see this happening on Earth, yes. But on the moon, they were only there for 20 hours total, I believe. So how's the flag going to get from one side to the other like this? Is anybody can answer me that question? Very strange. Here they're setting it up. Now there's the thin shadow. Now it's on the other side. So anyways, I just thought I'd bring that up. It's interesting. I see NASA-loving psychopath is there in the audience. Perhaps he could explain some of this.
Okay, when was the flag? The flag, he says, the flag was moved after an RCS test. Okay, when was that test done? Give me the time and date that the test was done. Don't just say it, don't just assert it, come up with evidence. That's what we ask for.
So you're telling me that they pulled the flag out, moved it?
I think he's claiming that the flag was blasted by the RCS thrusters and moved to the other side. But I gather from your presentation that you're talking about the actual shadow, not the flag position itself.
No, not the flag position. Oh, we're getting to that later on. That is very strange, but I'm not going to bring that up here. Yeah, just the shadow. Just the shadow. So now I've heard Paul Patton once claim, for example, Brian Popper Robson, I've heard him claim that the Apollo 15 flag, for example, he says that when the astronaut walked by the flag, one of the other astronauts was decompressing the LEM. So the air actually came out of the LEM. Wait a minute. The two of them are still outside. They're not decompressing anything. The LEM's already decompressed. And both of them are outside. So how can any wind or any RCS thrusters or anything blow that flag when that astronaut walks by it?
If he made that claim, he's being very silly. And I will say this, that there was actually, I can't remember if it was in American Moon or some other documentary where they discussed the actual pressures. They were supposedly measured by the Apollo 14 as it was venting the gases. On Apollo 14, they had an incident where this is after the astronauts have gone back into the spacecraft supposedly, and if the flag is off screen, and whilst suddenly the flag starts to drift back into the field of view, and that was argued that that was just because they were depressurizing the LEM. Well, hang on, if it was depressurizing them and the wind's blowing at the flag, you would think the flag would stay out of the frame. It wouldn't be blown back into the flame because it's literally blowing into the direction of the LEM. So that doesn't make any sense. But what they said in this documentary that I saw was that they looked through all the reports about the actual pressures recorded by the instruments they supposedly set up, and it was very, very low. It wouldn't have been. I don't remember the actual numbers off the top of my head, but it wouldn't have been sufficient to have blasted the flag. It wouldn't be akin to winds as we know them on Earth here. And as for Apollo 15, there was an entire section on the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal where they desperately tried to explain the cause of the flag movement. I think there was 6 or 7 excuses they came up with. Was it static electricity? Was it his footsteps? Yada, yada, yada. They went through each one of these things and they rejected all of them for one reason or another. And at the very end, they said, well, he might have bumped it with his elbow or the plus or something. And that was their best excuse for that. Except if you actually look at frame by frame analysis of the Apollo 15 flag video, you can see that the initial movement of the flag occurs as David Scott runs towards it. It just comes just before he approaches it, the flag starts to move away from him. Okay, which indicates that physical contact had nothing to do with this.
No, I mean, I've been through it. I've been through that frame by frame in the editor. He doesn't touch it.
Exactly. And so that literally debunks the last excuse the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal people were clinging on to. And so, clearly, if it was moved by physical contact, the only explanation for that then is that he must have pushed some air into the flag as he was running towards it.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's trying to claim that it was a pressure wave now. A pressure wave on the moon in a vacuum. A pressure wave. I don't know. Wonder how air is supposed to move in a vacuum. Can you explain that? No, I do understand that if you turn the engine on, or one of the retro control thrusters, for example, is venting, then sure, I can see that it's going to blow the flag. But in this case, there was nobody inside that LEM on that Apollo 15 flag. They were both outside. So there was no way that anyone was at those controls to vent anything. And that's what I went after with Brian Pop Robson on this. See, there's no way. I could see if one of the guys was inside, but he was claiming that they vented the door. See, there's a vent on an airlock on the door, right? And one of the guys was inside of it. But how can you I thought that either both have to be in there or they both have to be outside when they're either pressurizing or depressurizing. You can't just have one guy outside and the other one says, oh, wait a minute, I think I have to vent that thruster. Let's go back inside again.
Just to clarify there, Rob, is that they don't actually have a airlock on the Apollo spacecraft like they do on the space station. No. The idea is to depressurize.
No, on the door. No, what I mean by airlock, I meant by the pressure depressurization valve that they turn to open that, to let the air out, to vent the air.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just an aside as well. If you see me coughing or sounding a bit haggard and stuff like that, I just got over a cold, so I apologize if my voice isn't in its best shape today.
Yeah, that's a really nasty thing, getting that cold, I'll tell you. So I understand. But yeah, no, this is just something. And as far as that goes, I have a little surprise to add to that flag that is going to be interesting, because we did a whole breakdown in the editor between a bunch of different photos compared to the video. And what we found in there was very strange. As a matter of fact, the article was sent to us by the Not a Space Agency. Now, he sent that to us again, and we had a look at it. And it was very interesting what these two PhDs came up with. And of course, we show the papers as we do, like we always do. We always show the documents, and these guys are going on complaining about us. But, well, why don't you go and complain to the University of France? Why don't you go complain to the University of Patras? And why don't you go complain to the University of Athens? They're the ones that wrote the article. Oh, don't forget the one in Canada, too. These guys are writing the articles. We're just taking the information and showing it to you. And he's taken a lot of the documentation right from NASA because we show it in their PDF side by side. So I don't know how much more evidence we can put out there. You know, I mean, these guys know what they're doing. They're PhDs. And this was a collaboration of 3 different universities in 3 different countries. You have Greece, you have Canada, and you also have the other university that's in Athens. Well, same country, I get that, but okay, 3 universities nonetheless. You know, 3 universities, 2 countries. You know, like Phase 52 and all the rest of those guys. You know, go talk to those guys. Why you don't come complain to us about it? You know, so again, just
you know what would be a good challenge. Any of these NASA apologists, instead of talking smack on the comment sections, I would definitely put that StreamYard on there, and you could come in and let's see how tough you really are. I wouldn't even ask you to show your face. Just get on the mic and we will eviscerate you in a very
so what you're saying is that just give them a link to this show right now, and they could come up here and let them have a talk. Okay, how about that, NASA-loving psychopath? You want to come up here right now?
Come on in.
We'll send you a link. Come on up.
See, a lot of these guys, they love to talk smack online. I've dealt with these clowns on Twitter. And then when you challenge them to an actual debate, you know, let's go. Let's have a discussion. Let's have it civil. They won't do it. They won't do it. So
even in discussions, they can't keep it civil from my experiences.
Well, they won't even take it up.
Come on, NASA-loving psychopath. We're not going to bite you or be nasty. Why
NASA,
don't you come up? Oh, you see what he's saying? No, I'm debating here. You see
I'm
what
debating
I mean?
here. See
I'm
that's right. Let me put this up. So this is, I'm glad he wrote this so I can display it right here for everyone to see. Every time I ask these NASA loving apologists to actually debate it instead of doing it online, on Twitter, on a YouTube comment live chat, this is exactly how they run away from it. They make excuses as to why they won't do it. And so this is why I ignore them. I don't even take them serious. So I'm seeing these clowns talking all this smack, but it doesn't do anything to me because I know they do not have the cojones to show up. So here we go. NASA loving psychopath. I am debating here on the live chat. So there is his definitive no and his lack of cojones. So when you grow a pair, by all means, let us know, and we will send you that link. And that goes to any NASA apologist. You guys are welcome to lay your case in front of us, and again, you will be rhetorically eviscerated. Alrighty, ignoring that clown now. That is enough.
Yeah. So, anyways, I've said my piece. That's exactly what. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now he's saying, "Prove me wrong." Okay. Well, then you come up here, and we will.
Yeah.
But you don't want to come up here. Like we're inviting you here right now to a live show. We've got 257 people here right now in both streams. So come on up here and tell 257 people. And it's counting, by the way. By the time we're done, we should have at least 500, pretty close to it, because the numbers are rolling. So come on up here, NASA-loving psychopath. Come on, just have a talk with us. We're not going to bite. But if not, well, then,
if
shut
not,
up.
Marcus and I are the strangers to debates. I debated an astronaut.
Yeah. Jera destroyed an actual astronaut. So as far as we as a whole are concerned, we're not worried about it. Now, I only made that little diatribe real short and quick because a lot of these NASA apologists or trolls, they just like to rile us up and like to distract us from what we're doing. So the offer was made, and if they don't want to accept it, I suggest we just ignore them from here on out. If they change their mind and actually want to hit the StreamYard, we will send them the link. But other than that, we don't have to pay them any mind because it distracts us from what the rest of the people want to hear. They want to hear us, go over the moon landing myths and the evidence or counter evidence, all that good stuff. So these little spats with these guys are just distractions. And
I think I see another distraction in the comments there from Ironworks 92,000. Funny how Musk is in charge of government efficiency, yet the Earth is flat, and he will I feel, find a way to dismantle NASA. Well, the Earth is not flat, but you're right about one thing. He probably will dismantle the whole space agency as government efficiency head. Right? Incidentally, they don't need a government efficiency office. They already got that in the form of the what was it called? The Government Accountability Agency, I think it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. Government Accountability Office, that's what it is. But anyways, there's no question in my mind that Musk will probably try to replace all of the competing NASA rockets with his own rockets, and try to replace the Deltas and the Atlas rockets with his Falcons. Falcons at least have a proven track record, but the Starship, he'll probably he has long been opposed to the SLS rocket. He'll probably try to replace that as the launch vehicle for Artemis 2, which will just further and further delay. They're already talking about delaying Artemis 2 anyway because of the heat shield issue and something about the spacesuits, right? And but as has been shown from the I used to have a lot of respect for SpaceX. I looked up to SpaceX. They seem to be like the way of the future. They seem to have the solutions to solving the issues that we have with regards to radiation. He was back in 2010. Musk was essentially proposing a modern day equivalent of the Nova rocket or the UR-700 rocket. Basically, these gigantic heavy lift rockets that could easily lift to the shelter module that would be needed for a flight to the moon. What he's delivered is essentially a modern day equivalent of the N1 rocket. The N1 was the Soviet version of the Saturn V, which they didn't have any equivalent to the F1 engine, so they used 30 engine in the first stage alone. 30 engines, 30 smaller engines. Okay, the Super Heavy Starship has 33. Granted, they managed to handle 30 engines, all the way to stage separation, but as the last 4 launches has proved, even with no payload and the propellant's almost burned to completion, it falls just a hair short of reaching orbital velocity. So, yeah, obviously, this thing, if it can't get to orbital velocity, the best it can do is suborbit with an empty payload bay. How is it going to carry the shelter module to Earth orbit? And granted, the later models are supposed to be extended, so they can have more propellant in them. But even if they get that into orbit, there's still the talk about, you're going to need something like 20 tanker missions just to fill up the tanks to send it off to translunar injection. So it just doesn't seem like a viable option. Hello, anyone else here?
What are you up to, Scott?
Well, I'm just looking at some of the comments, and nobody's really asked us the question.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to bring politics and stuff into it, and we're not going there.
No, we're not. The only reason I highlighted that Buzz Aldrin endorsed Donald Trump was because it was related to Buzz Aldrin blocking me on Twitter over my response to that.
Oh, that was hilarious.
That was the only reason I
what was the
highlighted.
issues concerning that, if I may ask? How did you end up getting barred by the guy?
So, and again, it was a joke. I'm not trying to be political or anything, but it is kind of politically related. Buzz Aldrin made a post that he was endorsing Donald Trump, and I said, interesting. The fake moon landing guy just endorsed the fake assassination attempt guy. Not surprising, I suppose. And he blocked me.
Well, all he could do is block you. He couldn't throw a punch that far.
Yeah. He
could throw a virtual punch, I guess, is the best he could do.
I will say one thing about Donald Trump. This is the last political thing that we'll say on this program. In light of him getting reelected, I actually went out and sourced some physical copies of the January 6th investigation report, because there is no doubt in my mind, if he gets back into power, I've already downloaded the digital copies, but just there's also all this online supporting materials and don't be surprised if come sometime after January 20, all those reports just disappear.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I did see a few good questions. That one's a little bit off topic. Okay.
Here's
one.
How many people do we have with us now?
Looks on the YouTubes, we've got over 70. Over 30 there. So we are well over in the 100s all combined. So thank you for everyone that's tuning in live. It's awesome to have a
ask
little crowd that's wanting to learn. Yeah. And that's just the concurrent viewers over the next few days. Like, especially when I upload this conversation on my podcast player, by the end of the week, a lot of people like to listen to the shows, later on during the week at work or whatever. So, we're gonna have a nice little audience. We already do, as we're live. So, awesome stuff.
Yeah. Actually, just to follow up on a question that was asked about the film used in the Hasselblad cameras on the lunar surface was Kodak Ektachrome transparency material for the color photographs, and Kodak Tri-X and Plus X for the black and white. It's all made by Kodak. There was nothing very special about the film. Everybody tries to claim that this is special film designed to be used on the moon. So what was special about it? It had a thin backing. That was all was special. There was nothing special about the emulsion on the film, and that is why it was damaged, because it wasn't special. It couldn't be protected against the vacuum of space. The only thing that was made thinner than normal was the backing of the film, so that you could get 200 exposures into the big magazine. Normally you get 12 exposures on a 120 film or a 70mm film if it's cine film. But in still photography, you use either 12 exposure or 24 exposure film. On Apollo, they used 150 exposure for color and 200 exposure for black and white. And the film was just made a little bit thinner. There was nothing more special than that about it. Because if there is, it's never been described. People claim that there was a special film, which is why it survived the radiation. But nobody has ever described what was special about it. How did it survive the radiation and the vacuum? Nobody's told us.
Go ahead.
And if it was special, don't you think Kodak would have marketed it with the tagline "used on the moon"? It would sell. Kodak went bankrupt because they hadn't anticipated digital. So maybe they were just concentrating on trying to get this special film to work, which still hasn't been produced.
I would like to follow up what you were saying about this claim that there was special film. I think those people might be confused with the types of film and stuff. Apollo film, as we all know, was pretty much ordinary. There was a film that was flown on the lunar orbiter missions, and I think the Voyager missions as well. It was Kodak SO243. We discussed this on a previous show. This one is considered to be radiation resistant. And the reason being is that it requires 100 rads just to become 50% fogged. I looked into the details about this. And, of course, that's a far cry from the film on Apollo. It wasn't the same type of film. Compared to this was just no different to what you would buy at a camera shop.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. But if they had radiation protection on the film, I don't know how they'd do it, but if they did, you'd think Kodak or Agfa or Ilford or Fuji would have marketed it as that, because you were always advised, if you were traveling through airport security many years ago, to have your camera and your film hand searched by the security, not to put it through the machine, because the x-rays in the machine were quite powerful in those 50 years ago, and it would damage the photographic film, which is why professional photographers used lead-lined pouches to carry their film in, so it didn't get damaged.
I'm not sure if I don't think the SO243 film was ever commercially available, because you'd think they would have seen that on the packets or something, like you said. They would have been marketed as, oh, this is X-ray proof or something like that. But they didn't do that for either the film that was flown on Apollo. I think it was called it was Ektachrome. I forget the number right now, but it's you can look. I think you mentioned it earlier, Marcus, didn't you?
It was basic Kodak Ektachrome transparency material. Ektachrome is a very good film. It's versatile.
Yeah,
Kodachrome.
It was 160. There was 160, 168, and 326, I believe.
Yeah.
I used when I did that experiment in the chamber, the black and white stuff, that was a 168.
Yeah.
And that's why I paid so much money for it. And that was the one that fogged the worst, was that film. And it's supposed to be for high altitude.
Yeah.
So
David Groves did some experiments that documentary, What Happened on the Moon. He did some experiments which he showed that very low amounts of radiation could have severely fogged the film. And that was the film that they were using.
That's what radiation does to photographic film, but it doesn't do it to digital, because they're different means of recording images. We're talking photographic film here. That's what was used on Apollo. And the problem is that photographic film is damaged in space, in the vacuum of space, let alone with the radiation. And
Okay,
knowing, sorry, go on.
I was just about to respond to some dude's question, but you can continue, Marcus. Go on.
Yeah, no, the idea that photographic film was used in space, there were two spacecraft which used photographic film. The Hexagon Spy Satellite, KH-9, in the late 60s, early 70s, and the Lunar Orbiter, not the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the Lunar Orbiter, which flew in 1967 to photograph potential landing sites on the lunar surface. That was part of the original mission. Now, those two craft, the Hexagon Spy Satellite and the Lunar Orbiter, used photographic film. They're the only two spacecraft which have used them. And I was intrigued enough when I heard a lecture given by the guy who designed the camera system on Hexagon Spy Satellite, who actually said in his lecture that all the photographic film carried on the Hexagon and all the tubes through which the film was carried through the camera had to be pressurized. That's when the light bulb went off. I thought I'd never heard that before. And the reason I hadn't heard it was because the Hexagon Spy Satellite was classified until 2011. So how did they use photographic film in space? They had to pressurize it. 1 to 2 pound per square inch pressure. That's all that was required. On the Lunar Orbiter, they used a Polaroid type development system. So the film would be developed on board the spacecraft. The negative would then be scanned, and then scanning would then be transmitted back to Earth. The photograph then would be reassembled on Earth, but the film was taken on standard type Polaroid based system because Edwin Land was one of the consultants on that program, the Lunar Orbiter program. And because Polaroid is quite a versatile system, when the equipment was developed to develop it on board, which was done, that was all pressurized, and the scanning of it would have been done as well inside a pressurized container. If you look at the schematic of the Lunar Orbiter, you'll see there's a pressurized container on the spacecraft. It's not rocket science, this. It's just a bit of research.
Yeah.
So photographic film is damaged in space. Where were all those 5,771 color images and black and white images taken on the lunar surface, we're told? That's the big problem. As Victory Jin says, the film only had to survive the atmosphere of Cannon Air Force Base. Yeah, it's a good one, that. I like that. Cannon Air Force Base near Clovis in New Mexico. That's where it was done.
Awesome comment by Victory Jin. She's awesome.
Yeah. So, we're only being rude to people who don't agree. No, I say don't agree with us. We're not asking people to agree with us. We're asking people to, if they think we're wrong, to prove us wrong. It's not difficult to prove us wrong if you've got the information.
I would like to respond to some dude's question earlier. He asked, is there any proof that James Webb Telescope is or is not really placed at the spot our solar system is claimed by NASA? Well, first of all, I believe there have been some observations, telescopic observations, and by amateur astronomers around the world, and also people who would have received the signals. But here's the thing, right? The James Webb Telescope, it's an infrared satellite, okay? You can only do infrared astronomy in the very high altitude or in space. You know, it's the much of the atmosphere is opaque to infrared. That's why we put infrared telescopes onto spacecraft.
Interesting about James Webb, he's one of the most respected NASA administrators throughout the 60s as Apollo was being prepared. He resigned 2 weeks before, or a month or so before Apollo 8, which seemed a very strange thing for the administrator to do, unless he was not prepared to go along with the fraud that was being proposed. But because he's such a respected administrator, they named the telescope after him, maybe in honor of his contribution to NASA when it was a real agency and not a faking agency. Just want to shout out to James Webb. He had the respect of a lot of people. He was a very good administrator. And at the time of Apollo 8, which was rushed forward as a result of the Soviet playing an interesting little trick on America. When they launched, was it Luna 15?
Yeah, it was Zon 5. Zon 5,
Oh,
I
Zon
think.
5, that's right, Zon 5. Zon 5 with tortoises and various biological specimens on board. Well, they didn't have anybody. They put a tape recorder on board. So when Zon 5 got close to the moon, they heard this voice describing the moon in detail. Oh, look, we can almost touch it. We're so close. And that made America believe that Russia were about to land on the moon. They'd done 3 months before Apollo 8 did it for America. They thought Russia had done it with humans on board Zon 5. There weren't humans on board. It was a tape recorder. Russians are good chess players. And as was it, I forget who's the.
I got the names of the cosmonauts. There was Pavel Popovich, Vitaly Sevastyanov, and I'm probably butchering these names here, Valery Maikovsky. Those were the cosmonauts involved in this little prank they did.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a brilliant piece of trolling. That's basically what it was. And as one of the American astronauts who visited
Frank Borman.
Who was it?
Borman.
That's it. He said, "You're space hooligans."
That's really a accusation to be throwing around, considering that he's just pretended to fly around the moon himself.
Yeah.
And, I would like to mention something as well. People it'll probably come up in the chat sooner or later, anyways. But a lot of people like to talk about the tortoises and the insects and the fruit flies and everything that they fly. Oh, that proves that they went. That proves that we can survive the radiation on the flight to the moon. No, it doesn't, because you look up the death doses of those creatures. They can all survive huge amounts of radiation. Like the tortoises, for example, they require something like tens of thousands of rad to kill them. Okay, in fact, I got a little article here right now. Tortoise blood fights radiation sickness. They had this. There was a study back in the early 2000s where they found that you could use these amino acids in the tortoise blood to fight radiation sickness. What do they say? Here we go. They say it requires 40,000 Roentgens compared to only 800 Roentgens to kill 50% of the population. That's how much you need to kill a tortoise. Kill a tortoise. And what was else? Oh yeah, the plants that they carried aboard. This always gives me a laugh because it demonstrates the complete ignorance when people try to cite this as evidence, right, as proof that they can go to the moon. The plants that they carried on Zon 5, they were spiderwort plants. You know what the nickname for a spiderwort plant is?
Yeah,
a living Geiger counter. That's because you expose it to huge amounts of radiation, its stigmas simply change color.
Wow. Yeah. There's radiation in space, and your recent YouTube film, Radiation Reloaded, I think covers it very well. Yeah. It's technical, it's complex, but it does describe the problem with radiation very well.
Yes, and it should be emphasized that I used the actual numbers reported from the industry standard model for the Van Allen fluxes. When I looked up those fluxes, I got the extra coordinates that have been attributed to Apollo 11. I plugged those coordinates into the model. Here's the flux for each coordinate, and I did the calculations, and I worked out that the astronauts, they should have received up to about 100 rads of radiation, which 100 m of radiation, which is that's life-threatening. That's just from the radiation exposure in the belts alone. We're not even considering the solar flares and the like. So it's
that's true. Yeah. That's
The
a good
whole, the
point.
whole fact of the matter is they reported they only received about less than the REM, for the skin alone, which is just crazy when you actually consider what should have been received. And let me tell you, the fluxes had also been used by the coordinates had also been used by an opponent who tried to prove the radiation was safe, but he kept downplaying the hazard. He was using outdated data to try and push his idea, like he was claiming that the spacecraft would stop shielding from up to about 100 RAM and anything high, up to 100 mega electron volts, and anything higher that will go through the astronauts. Okay, what's your source? He was citing a graph which was based on data from the 1930s, back when we were still in our infancy as far as particle acceleration studies are concerned. And the data that I found from NASA, they indicated that the shield would only stop particles up to about 8 mega electron volts. And the idea that anything greater than 100 mega electron volts would go through the astronaut is ludicrous, because I'm not sure if your audiences are familiar with proton therapy, but in proton therapy you would accelerate the particle to a certain energy, and then you would direct it at the cancer. The idea is you would fire the protons basically through this little pencil beam of sorts at the tumor in question, so that no healthy tissues on the other side are destroyed. And the key thing is protons, they tend to lose their energy at the very maximum depth they can reach, you see. And so once they've reached the maximum depth, boom, there goes all the energy into the tissues. And so they typically to penetrate the human skull, they use radiation in the order of 200 mega electron volts. And so they use this to kill tumors in the chest or in the brain, using these kinds of particle accelerators. And this guy is claiming that they will go straight through. Clearly, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And after I released my Radiation Reloaded video, he literally deleted any mention of the Apollo moon landing hoax from his website. No explanation, just gone.
Yeah. It's interesting how much of the Apollo discussions have been deleted from YouTube in the last 5 years. There's a talk I gave in Manchester in the UK in 2018 in front of quite a large audience, and it was filmed very, very well. It's posted online. It accumulated several 100,000 views within a few months, and suddenly it was gone. First I knew about it was when I got an email from somebody who wanted to watch it, said he couldn't find it. And I then found that the person who had posted it, the company that was being used by the conference in Manchester, he had been threatened by YouTube that if he didn't remove any film debating Apollo being faked, his whole channel would be demonetized. And he couldn't afford that, so he had to delete a couple of my films. Fortunately, Apollo Detectives, through Robert's very useful website, has reposted them. So they're still visible, they're still available. Go on to Apollo Detectives on YouTube and you'll find them. You'll find a lot of other things as well. A lot of other films, it's not just mine. There's well over 100 discussions that Robert Scott and myself have been involved with, and Jara and various other researchers from the UK and around the world contribute as well. And it seems to be quite popular. It gets films. Robert manages to post films up on there most weeks, usually very well illustrated. It's not just my face or Scott's face. Robert's illustrating what we're talking about, so it's easier to follow along. And if we make mistakes, well, we'll correct them.
Exactly. I have a track record of correcting mistakes when they've been made, and acknowledging to them. In fact, in my latest article that I put out on on Ollis, which was about the Polaris Dawn mission, and comparing it with Gemini 11 and the Apollo missions and stuff. The many propagandists had cited Gemini 11 as proof that the astronauts can go to the moon because it went into the belts. They don't specify how high it went or what the actual readouts were. What they really did was just kiss the innermost edge of the belt during a elliptical orbit. Previously they had to really circular orbit, much more closer below the radiation belt, and for two orbits it made, just like Polaris Dawn, for 2 orbits it made 2 highly elliptical orbits, which briefly kissed the inner edge of the belt, then went back down again. Before I had looked into the actual specifics about Gemini 11, I was misled into believing that Gemini 11 was a hoax, and I acknowledge that mistake, so I acknowledge that mistake, and I actually specify that in the article. If I get caught in error, I open and openly acknowledge it, and I work to make corrections. And I just noticed a comment here by someone, Max Spock. Jera was the one who opened my eyes to all of this. Glad I could help out.
Yep.
I see some people are still posting about the Earth being flat in there. We don't deal with that nonsense here, my friend.
Yep.
On my channel, I'm open to anyone saying everything, but yeah, the Apollo detectives take a firm stance. I listen to it all. Doesn't mean I believe it all, but with the world being full of lies and a lot of stuff, I'll listen to anything. It doesn't mean
I should have mentioned this during my my introduction. Is that I have degrees in astrophysics and geology, and as a geologist, I have firsthand experience. Looking into the Earth itself, we have global seismic surveys. We can look into the actual planet itself. We measure the seismic waves. We've got P waves, we've got S waves. Some will travel through solids, some will only travel through some will travel through both solids and liquids, others will only travel through solids. And we can use these waves to map the interior of the Earth. And the idea that the Earth is flat, it just doesn't fit with our global measurements. This is measurements made by people all over the world. This is not something that you have to rely on NASA to prove to you. This is something that has been constantly measured every day, and even taught to university students. University students have their own experience. I'm speaking from experience here. We have our own experience, learning this stuff, from the people who are actually involved in this sort of stuff. We are put into groups of surveys, groups of people doing our own surveys and stuff. We get our measurements and we do our reports on that. And it just doesn't, the idea that it's flat, it just doesn't add up with the data we have to work with.
Yeah.
I get you. I'm open to anyone, and everyone's opinion is welcome on my channel anyways. Everyone comes to their own conclusions. Sometimes people come around, sometimes people just, I don't know. Free speech is the way I look at it. And free speech doesn't mean speech you only agree with. Free speech includes speech you disagree with. That's what free speech is all about, and that's what I'm all about at the end of the day. But yeah, let's see. There was one question that I wanted to bring up to you guys. So let's see.
Well, I can make a comment on that because, I don't have a problem with people having free speech, but I don't need to listen to it, especially if they're off their meds. And they just want attention. If all they want is attention, they're not going to get it from me.
Yeah, and I've had my fair share of these people basically hijacking my stuff and misrepresenting it. Not just my stuff, Marcus Allen's stuff, Bill Casing, David Percy's, Bart Sprell's, Ralph Renee's. They all, one way or another, they all come across our materials and they misappropriate it to try and push this idea that all space travel is fake or that the Earth is flat. In fact, Marcus and I, we both had an experience of being solicited to interview under false pretenses to appear on a podcast or a radio show or something or other, which was I remember this from my experience better. Marcus will probably tell you about his experience, but I was brought onto this radio show under the impression that I would be, talking about the moon landing hoax, and for the most part, it was that. But then somebody started asking questions about the thermosphere, how the spacecraft's not melting in that, and some questions about the ISS, which that should have sent some alarm bells ringing, right? And I just answered there as best as I could. And as soon as I was off the program, their next guest was some guy who thinks that the moon is a hologram. Okay, and so I know, and so basically later on, the host actually left a comment on my channel, made his true colors known. This was when I basically told everybody if you believe the Earth is flat, please unsubscribe from my channel. He would left a comment on my thing, basically smearing his complete idiocy over the place. And I said, look, if you're going to continue propagating this nonsense, please remove my interview from your archives. And he did. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I've got friends that believe the moon is or that the Earth is flat. Good friends of mine. I don't agree with them at all, but they're good friends of mine, and that's why I'm saying I guess everyone has their journeys to get to their places that they're at, and all we can do is provide, what we have as the best case for why we believe in what we believe, and demonstrate it. But yeah, everyone has different views on it. I know Dr. Roz is vehemently against it. Which is funny because it was a similar situation to what you brought up. I had Dr. Raza one week, and then I had my friend who's a big time flat earther. He's got a huge flat earth podcast. I had him on like the next week, 2 weeks. It wasn't done on purpose. It was just the scheduling of it. And so that's why I don't, as long as you're not infringing on someone's well-being, I don't care what you believe in. I don't care what you identify as. That's just my live and let live is the way I look at things. All right.
There's probably a question, but a statement by some dude, if you bring that up. He says, still any moon landing hoax research for flat earthism or space denial is the lowest low IQ people will go in this research here. This is research here. Yeah, well, that's like I said, that's the problem we have to deal with. You see, they keep taking our stuff and misappropriating it without realizing that our stuff is only consistent with the Earth being a sphere and space travel being real. Like, for example, how do you think we know there is a Van Allen radiation belt if we haven't been sending spacecraft into it to detect it? And furthermore, why would there even be a radiation belt existing if the Earth was flat? The belts exist because the Earth has an inner core and outer core made of iron. The rotation of the outer core generates this magnetic field. The magnetic field in turn traps all this solar flare particles and solar winds in between the magnetic field lines. That's why we have radiation belts. And not just the Earth, Saturn and Jupiter, they have their own radiation belts too. They both have huge magnetic fields, okay, and they both experience the same collection of radiation in their magnetic field lines.
Yeah, but Jara, one thing I was wondering, well, all the other planets and the moons, they're all spheres. So why would the Earth, out of billions and trillions and Googleplexes of these heavenly bodies, why would the Earth be the only single one that is flat?
That's an excellent point. Just a minor correction though. There are some irregularly shaped moons. That all comes down to how.
No, but I don't mean pancake. Like I don't mean pancaked. I mean they're oblate and they're rough and edgy, but eventually they all turn into spheres because
exactly that's because of how massive they are. If you actually look, you see the asteroids and stuff. They're very potato shaped. They're asteroids that are the size of this house that I'm sitting in right now. They just look like clumps of rock. They're asteroids as big as a city. They look like clumps of rock. But as you get larger and larger and more massive, you can start to see them become more and more rounded. Okay, so it would literally be physically impossible for something to be as massive as the Earth and not be spherical.
No, I see gravity's pulling everything into the center. That's just
exactly.
The way it works.
That's what causes it. You see,
let's just assume for a moment that they did get to Mars. Let's just say they have these rovers running around on Mars. I have a hard time believing it, especially after what I see. I mean, I see so much junk and trash laying all over the place. And I mean, Jimmy Roberts, I think he's a little pareidolia-ish, but when I look at some of these original photographs from Mars, I'm thinking, my goodness, there's swords, bats, pieces of roofs of trailers. There's a door, like literally a door with a window broken out of it. And we're talking right from NASA's photo gallery. And these haven't been altered, because you can get a program that you can convert the originals into a PNG file. And I have that now. So when I'm looking at the originals, I'm seeing the same thing. And it's a little clearer, by the way, too, which is very interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of trash laying around Mars. So I don't understand this. But let's just assume that they did go there. And I mean, there's so many planets out there that there has to be life somewhere out there. There has to be. It just doesn't make sense. There just has to be. So if all the other planets are round and they're spherical and there's life on other planets, well, does that mean that the Earth is the only one that's flat? I just don't understand. I don't understand. Like for example, with the ISS, I get it. They always use these stupid fisheye cameras. If they would just use a regular camera, you would not see a curve. You know how far you would have to be out there to see that? I mean, let's face it. Look at when the Polaris Dawn went up there. These guys, that's not the curve you're seeing. I don't know how many times I've shown Africa from the space station. Matter of fact, I think the last video before last I showed it. Here comes Africa, right? But because they have the fisheye lens, it looks like the whole Earth. But it's just Africa because there's no clouds. Because there's no clouds for a change, and you could see the whole continent. And here's the problem: because the fisheye lens is there, guess what? You see the whole Earth as that continent. But if you would pull away that fisheye lens, you will not see a curve. You won't see anything. Look how far those guys were out there, and there's no curve. But the thing is, they're not out far enough. When you take a look at the satellite that's sitting in the L1 zone, and then that satellite's looking back, taking pictures, guess what? Oh, boy, you don't just see the curve. You see the whole Earth. And it's round, and it's rotating. So if the Earth's rotating, but if the Earth's rotating, well, it has to be a sphere, doesn't it? Because the clouds are rolling with it.
I have a whole article about this on Olosu, in which I actually show how you can calculate how much curvature you can see. Let me just see if I can share this in the chat.
But the thing is, too, the curve calculator, a lot of people use the wrong one. And that's why they get the answers wrong. And same with the elevation. I mean, you have to take the elevation into account where the camera is, how high the camera is off of the surface of where they're taking it, and then take the measurements from the island or whatever they're taking it above sea level. And there is Fata Morgana, because when you look at some of these ships, I mean, I've seen ships literally 100 feet in the air. That's what it looks like. These big tankers are 100 feet in the air, and they're reversed. So they're upside down, and people think they're UFOs because the whole ship is actually turned upside down, and it's 100 feet in the air, but that's just because of the atmosphere. So
do you want to share the
crazy stuff.
Yeah, do you want to share the link that I just posted in the private chat?
Oh, yeah, sure. Is that .com fatal?
It's Ollis.
There it is.
So it's
Okay. Well, let's just pull this up here. Let's go to present. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, if you scroll a bit down, right. This is an article I put out about that guy was silly enough to get himself killed in a rocket test trying to prove that the Earth was a sphere. You actually go down. I actually demonstrate how high. There's a calculation that you can use. Like here from an aeroplane, as you can see, you can just barely see the curve of the Earth, but it's there. You put a straight line across the image, you can see the curve just barely, and that's from the high altitude of a plane. Oh, and fun fact: this picture was actually taken by a flat earther. Scroll further down, you'll see more. Yes, more of the same. Scroll down. Keep scrolling down. I'll tell you when to stop.
Yeah, that was too bad. Yeah, I really felt sorry for him. I mean, that was he. That was a shame he had to die for that.
If you scroll up just a second, just the previous picture of the Earth. Yeah, okay. This one was taken. One at the top there was taken by the by Brian Binney, the second guy to fly the what was it called, the Spaceship One. He flew all the way up to he's literally bang on the Kármán line here, and you can obviously you can see the curve of the Earth. Okay, if you put a straight line over the screen, you'll see it bulging above that straight line. And the lower picture down there, as you can see, is obviously the Elon Musk Tesla Roadster, which ascended to the altitude between the inner and outer radiation belts, and obviously the.
Do you think that's real though? I've got questions about that.
Yeah, it's real, mate, because people have actually tracked
the Elon Musk one.
Yep, I'm no longer a fan of Elon Musk, but trust me, I know that shot is for real.
And well, here's the thing, Jared. You know what I think with this? I think, you see, there's no way somebody like Musk, for example, there is no way somebody's going to spend that kind of money, millions and millions of dollars out of his very own pocket to not send that vehicle somewhere. It went on that rocket. We saw that car getting
He's a
loaded
military
onto
contractor,
rocket,
though. Elon Musk is a military contractor, essentially.
Yes,
well,
but
the contractors from civilians and military. That's not really the point. And the point is, okay, for the moment's sake, let's just say this is real. You can see how much difference the height makes. And if you scroll further down, you'll see I actually show the calculation that you need to use to determine how much curvature should be visible to given out. Just scroll down a bit, please. A bit further than that. Oh, yeah, that's an excellent picture. Okay, here we go. Yep, that's good. No, scroll down a bit so you can actually see the calculations.
There you go.
Okay, well, basically what you want to do is you want to know the height and what we're looking at here is we're looking at we make the a right triangle. Okay, the person's line of sight to the horizon will be the opposite side of the triangle. Okay, and the hypotenuse will be the radius of the Earth and the human, and the adjacent side of the triangle will be the radius of the Earth itself. So what we basically want to do is if you actually just scroll just a tiny bit further down, and you'll see the actual full calculation. Bit too far, but yeah, you can see the basic calculations there. So what we're plugging into the equation is basically the we want the adjacent and the hypotenuse. As I said, the hypotenuse, that's going to be the radius of the Earth plus the observer height. Okay, so then you basically take the arc cos, which will basically give you the amount of degrees, how much the Earth is curved by. And through there, you can basically multiply the amount of degrees by the constant, 111.32 kilometers per degree, right? So people like to say, "Oh, well, how come we can't see that?" Well, how many degrees are you expecting to see when it curves at 111 kilometers per degree? Okay, so that gives you the idea. Like at ground level, as you can see, you have to be about. You can only see as far as about 5 kilometers.
Okay, Jared, I have a question for you, though. Why don't, for all these people out there, they're going to do that final experiment, all right, where that Matt's taking all those people to Antarctica to put this to rest once and for all. But that's not going to work. We all know that. So I have a better idea. Why doesn't somebody ask Elon Musk if they could send one flat earther and one guy, just the same thing this guy's doing with the final experiment. And I wonder, do you think that would settle this whole issue if they actually saw it with their own eyes?
Well, I'm sure they would probably try some way to deny it or something like that. Like, you probably put television screens over the windows or shit like that. There'd be so much evidence to the contrary of that. But I think it would be a worthwhile, fun experiment. And of course, you don't even have to go all the way to orbit. There's a few cheaper options there. There is Richard Branson's option, which gets you as high as about 85 kilometers altitude, which is considered space as far as the U.S. Air Force is concerned. And you've got Jeff Bezos' was it Blue Shepard, which takes you about as high as the Kármán line, and that's considered space for the rest of the world. And so both of those options would be high enough to get you to see the curvature of the Earth, and And I would have no objections to somebody paying to take one of these guys to space to see the curvature of the Earth. And
or even you know what would be even better if they would send them to the ISS.
Yeah,
And
that's
let
a good
them
option.
send 2 people to the International Space Station. I mean, let's put it this way. Look at some of the people that they've sent. I mean, there's companies that have paid for it. I mean, look at Polaris Dawn. So why can't they just have select one of the person from the flat Earth community and just send them to the space station? I mean, that would pretty much, you think it would solve the whole problem, wouldn't you? That would put 2 issues to bed.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be a worthwhile option. If there's anybody with deep pockets who are willing to buy, 2 tickets, for the thing, like 1 ticket for the guy who's paying for the trip, 1 ticket for the flat earther, that'd be excellent. I've actually got a friend who's been trying to get me on the final experiment as well, as a third party observer of sorts, Yeah. This friend of mine, he as a cousin who unfortunately fell to the dark side and started believing the flat earth, he actually got me on a debate on FTFE's channel with this one flat earther. Let me tell you, that was quite the experience. I actually suffered a migraine on camera, and I actually he got me to debate this flat earther because he reckons if anybody can show his relative the light, it would be I, the grandson of the Apollo Moonlanding theory.
But you know something? I mean, I saw Mick Toon or MC Toon. I saw him, and this was something that I did not agree with what he did. It was funny at first, but it got so dark. What he did was he had one of the persons from the flat Earth community on, and he was from Australia, and he had teased him and teased him and teased him, and it went so far as this guy was. And of course he claimed to be a Christian in the whole 9 yards, but Toon had pushed him so far that he was threatening to do things to his wife and cut his you-know-what off, and it kept going, and it got darker and darker, and Toon sat there and laughed like a hyena through the whole thing. This went on for half an hour. I don't know how it got monetized, and I don't know how it even got on YouTube. This was so dark. I mean, he was really toying with this guy, and that's just wrong to do stuff like that. I don't care if he hates people or what's wrong, but there's something wrong with Toon's head. There really is, to do something like that to a human being.
I'm not familiar with the debate you're talking about, but I don't condone that kind of behavior.
Oh, my God. I could not believe it that he was doing this to another human being. And I'm telling the people in the comment section said, "I'm phoning the police. We're phoning the police," because there was people in Australia listening to this, right? They were going to phone this is how bad it got.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. In Australia, it's actually a felony to use the internet to harass people. Yeah. I had this.
The problem is Toon's in America, though.
Well, all the same, a jurisdiction from Australia can be fought overseas. As I was saying, I've had my share of attacks from the pro NASA side and everything. And forgive me for mentioning this on your program. I had this one fellow who he went so far as to not only troll the video of me scattering Ralph Renee's ashes, he actually took my face and stuck it onto a picture of a vagina. It looked like my face was the clitoris or something. Obviously that since has been removed from YouTube for not only copyright but also terms of service violations. And it was many years ago. I don't really like to talk about that sort of stuff. But had he done that, had he done that in Australia, right? Then their argument was, oh, it's transformative parody or fair use of the footage or this or that. If he tried that excuse in front of an Australian judge, the judge would cut his balls off. Let me tell you that because
what about Ralph?
I'm glad I don't live in Australia, man.
Yeah,
I love my freedom of speech.
But Ralph Renee, did he have any offspring? Did he have any children, or was he? What was his background? In other words, he must have. Was he married? Did he have kids? Or was he just like a loner? Or?
He was a bit of a loner. He had a couple children, but he was a loner as well. You see, he had a girlfriend, and he was a member of Mensa, the High IQ Society, and he actually written some papers. He was contacted by the Rand Corporation for any free ideas to give NASA on space travel, and he sent about 3 or 4 of them. He didn't hear back from them, but apparently they had been approved for the back then it was called the Space Exploration Initiative, if I recall correctly, which was their proposal to eventually land somebody on Mars. And at this point, he had read Bill Casing's book. He had read Moongate. He had read various books, suggesting that the moon missions were faked. And he started to look at the footage himself again and started to see anomalies in it. And so he gets this document called America at the Threshold, which was basically touting this space exploration initiative. And he looks into he has his name listed smack bang in the middle of all these consultants who had sent ideas for this project. And you think, oh my God, they're using my idea. My ideas must have been approved, first of all. But secondly, they're using my name. This is what Rene was thinking. They're using my name to promote their program, which he believed was going to be another hoax. And so that's what compelled him to basically put together all these notes. He read through all these different books by the astronauts. He basically contacted Bill Casing and he said, "Hey, Bill Casing, I got this dirt on NASA. Here's this, here's that, here's this, here's that." And Casing says, "Well, why didn't you write it into a book?" And so that's pretty much how NASA Moon America came about.
Oh, okay, so that's interesting. Yeah.
Now, Rene, he was crippled by arthritis, and he was a victim of the healthcare system in the United States. There's an excellent documentary by Michael Moore called Sicko. I actually saw this the year after Rene died, and let me tell you, when I saw that documentary, I cried because I was literally getting deja vu of all the malpractice, all the problems with the healthcare system that Rene had often ranted and raved about on the phone to me and stuff. Or I don't really want to say ranted and raved, but complained, rightly so, about. He was constantly denied healthcare coverage, and on the worst case was when he was denied joint hip surgery because he couldn't pass this pre-operation stress test, which, as he called it, it was a test that an Olympic athlete with a sprained ankle couldn't pass, let alone a man on a walker. Anyways,
I was going to ask you, where did he get the idea for that glove?
Oh,
The machine he made where he put the glove in there, because a lot of people were saying that's not going to work. That glove collapses. Where you have the Apollo gloves, they are so robust.
Well, people make a lot of
it's like a gauntlet almost, and I'm wondering, because when you see these guys in England, there's a place where you could go. I think, Marcus, you know what I mean? It's a place where you could go to put your hands inside of the actual gloves and move the screws around and try to do the nuts and bolts. Because I think Ben said he tried it once, or he went there. And remember what happens? Every time you see them doing that, people doing it and recording it, they never they never add air or they never create a vacuum in there.
Yeah. I think
how's that going to work? So Ralph Rene, but that glove Ralph put on there, but that's still going to demonstrate what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and it should be noted as well. People like to make these complaints. Oh, yeah, the glove doesn't match the Apollo gloves. Well, heck on, the Apollo gloves were neoprene and was it nylon lined, and Rene's was basically a neoprene cotton lined glove. It's close enough to what he could get a hold of. And he found that if you would what he would do is he wouldn't inflate it to a complete vacuum. He would only inflate their box just so that it would mimic the pressure inside the suit. You could look at the specifications. It ranged from about 3.7 to 5.2 psi.
So what did he have the glove? What did he have that box down to?
He said he could only get it as high as about, if I recall correctly, I think he could only get it as high as about 4 or 5. It would burst after a while. You see, he could only run it at a certain pressure. But he found even with that in the parameters of the Apollo spacecraft, the Apollo spacesuit gloves, he found he could very limited feeling on the fingertips and whatnot. He found he couldn't really force a fist or hold a fist, and it was very difficult to move around in.
Yeah,
now a lot of people. Can I just say one thing quickly?
I'm sorry. I'm not cutting you off. I have about a second delay on my end.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. there's a lot of delays happening right now. A lot of people like to say, well, what about the space shuttle gloves? A lot of people don't realize this, but the space shuttle gloves actually have some improvements over the Apollo gloves. One that stood out in my mind was the fact that they had this rubbery fabric called turtle skin. It's not actual turtle skin, but it's actually what they call the material. It's what they put on the outer thing of the glove to give you some more of a grip and stuff. The gloves that they had on Apollo, they couldn't grip anything smaller than an inch.
No, because that girl. Yeah, see that woman in that last spacesuit. It wasn't Prada. It was the Axiom. I know this was the Axiom suit that before they had Prada make the other one. But the Axiom suit that woman was in, I mean, she was going like this, trying to make a circle, like, okay, with you're making the okay with your hand, the okay sign. Yeah, yes. She could barely even do that. And they only put about 2 pounds of pressure in there. It wasn't much. And she could barely do that with those gloves. Mind you, she's not trained. I get that. But then she tries to, they pressure the suit up, and then she tries to actually do some nuts and bolts. And she just get to the point where she gave up. And then they redid it again. And then she finally just, she was really having a hard time getting that nut on there. So, and I'm thinking that how many hours do these guys have to train just to get a nut and bolt together?
Yeah, it's astonishing to say the least. I would like to get back to Renee for just a second and stuff like that, because the last I spoke to him was a few days before he died. He was constantly talking about how he didn't feel like he would be able to live for much longer because of all the pain he was in with the arthritis. And I never forget this. The last thing I said to him, I said, Ralph, this may sound like a stupid question about how much longer do you think you have? And he said to me, for as long as I can hold out. A few days after that phone call, he was in a car crash with his daughter. The car flipped, and it worsened his pain to the point that he couldn't even sit or lay down because it was just too painful. He became an insomniac as a result of that. And on the 2 days after the accident, he told his girlfriend to go home early, and the next day his neighbor found he had taken his own life by putting a shotgun in his mouth. He had left a box of goodbye cards and the like, and he said in his book that he wasn't suicidal, but at this point it wasn't so much suicide as it was relief through release. And so
it was just too much pain then.
Exactly, yes. And so that's I can imagine why I might resent having footage of his funeral, of his ashes being scattered, being defaced.
Yeah, really. Well, that's no different than what MC Toon did to that member of the Flat Earth community. It was just disgusting, and he was sitting there cackling like a hyena. I mean, at first I thought it was funny because I didn't really understand what was going on. But after I watched it for about 10 minutes and go, wait a minute, something's wrong with this guy. Something's wrong with Toon's head to do something like that to somebody.
That's just him, though. I mean, he's a jerk.
I mean, I thought he was, very rude to Marcus, but what he did to this guy here, there's no excuse for that. And I'm really surprised that he didn't lose a lot of subscribers over that. I mean, because there was people in there that were just blown away by his actions, what he was doing in there.
That's what he does. I mean, when he debated Marcus, he pulled out the Rubik's Cube, and his audience thought it was cute and adorable. He's just a jerk.
Basically, I called him out on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Mr. Marcus Allen whooped his behind handily.
Oh, he got a lesson in humility for once in his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first time I think anybody ever called him out in public. And
yeah, he just has that same system where he'll look for one tiny little, like if you were to write a sentence and you missed an apostrophe. Oh, how come you missed the apostrophe? Why didn't you catch it? He'll just pounce on that. That's his whole MO. It could be something stupid.
Yeah, or Wheezy, did you notice with his books? See, he would always hold his books up. You know, oh, I was in astronomy, or I was in astrophysics, or I did this, and he holds his math books up, and then he holds this book. Oh, wait a minute. I even have the debate book. Here, I'll show you. Right, holds that up. And then I love when Marcus said, okay, you have that too. Oh, yeah, I have mine right here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, here it is right here. You know,
I got my college textbooks on my shelf somewhere. I got stacks and stacks of college books. I can easily show you mine too. And I can show you my degree completion letter as well, you know?
Oh, by the way, that guy still owes you $1 million, doesn't he?
I knew this was going to come up sooner or later. But okay, what happened was, I don't really want to turn this into a flat Earth discussion, but what happened was that guy who I debated on Fight the Flat Earth channel, he goes by the name of Murray Sandy, and let me tell you, he literally personifies the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. Yeah. He kept citing the rocket thruster equation without realizing that this equation literally tells you why a rocket will work in space. He's like, no, you need the outside pressure for the rocket to work. He keeps thinking pressure is mass. Anyways, he started harassing me over Messenger. And he kept saying, every time you call him out, his go-to response is, oh, you don't understand physics. You never studied physics. He's Italian, so he has that kind of accent. You don't understand physics. You never studied physics. And I said,
sound like an Austrian.
Yeah. I said, how much do you want to bet I never studied physics? $10,000? $100,000? He says, I bet 1 million euros. And I say, okay, good. Here's my degree completion. Let up my 1 million euros, please. And I'm still waiting to pay up.
I know it's late for Marcus, and I don't want to keep you too late out of respect for you.
That's all right. I was going to suggest that we might cover Apollo 13.
Yes,
as a subject of interest.
Oh yeah,
all heard of Apollo 13. There's been a very good film made about it by Ron Howard, starring Tom Hanks and a few other guys. There we go. Lost Moon. That was an interesting book. So, Apollo 13, what happened? They had an accident on the way to the moon, we're told. And they were brave because they survived the cold. We're told it was cold in a spacecraft in sunlight. How could it be cold? Anyway, that's what we were told. What we're not being told is what happened the day after the official launch of Apollo 13. It was launched on April the 11th, 1970. The big rocket went off. Everybody watched it going off. 2 minutes after it had launched, it disappeared from view. Nobody saw what happened after that. We had to rely on NASA to tell us. What NASA didn't tell us, well, certainly not in any great detail, was what happened to the command module on Apollo 13, which was picked up in the Bay of Biscay, which is to the north of Spain, to the west of France. It's an area of the Atlantic Ocean. It's called the Bay of Biscay. The Soviet Navy were conducting exercises. That was well known, conducting exercises in the Bay of Biscay, and they happened to come across an Apollo command module floating in the water the day after the official launch of Apollo 13. So being sensible people, they said, oh, somebody must have lost this. We better take it back and give it to whoever lost it. So they hauled it on board one of their ships, took it back to their base at Murmansk. 6 months later, the USS Coast Guard cutter Southwind was paying a courtesy visit to Murmansk, and they were asked to take it back to America, which they did. There are photographs of it on the deck of the Southwind, and there are photographs of the command module being returned to America, because that's one of the parts of the international agreement that anybody finding something that has fallen from space should return it to the owners. So the Soviet Union, as it was known then, did exactly that, returned it back to America. That command module is now on display at the Grand Rapids Museum. Unfortunately, it's sealed as a time capsule until the year 2076, the 300th anniversary of the founding of America. There's a problem with this. There's another Apollo 13 command module capsule on public display in Kansas, at the Kansas Cosmodrome. Why are there 2 Apollo command modules on public display from Apollo 13? It's the only mission on which 2 Apollo command modules are on display. Somebody offered to go and have a look at it and see if they could see inside it. You can't see inside it, unfortunately. It's been sealed. The one in Grand Rapids in Michigan. So was the accident on Apollo 13 the fact that the mission was aborted just after launch because it was off course? Because for a command module to be landing in the Bay of Biscay when launched from Florida, that is not on the normal course for an equatorial orbit, which all Apollo command modules followed. They launched from Florida. They flew east from Florida across Africa. And if they could see the Eye of Africa, which is a geological feature in Mauritania, they'd probably know they're on the right course. So they'd watch out for it. They would then fly on across India or south of India. They'd go up across the Pacific. And the official translunar injection firing towards the moon, according to the official NASA press kits, was just south of the equator, west of Hawaii. So they flew straight through the Van Allen radiation belts. Spacecraft don't have steering wheels. You can't alter the trajectory you fire your rocket on. So you've got this problem with the command module discovered by the Soviet Navy in the Bay of Biscay. And it's not discussed. Very few people even know about it. There's a full record of both the American version of that story and the Russian version of that story on the owlis.com website, which Jara showed earlier. It's got a lot of stuff on that website from Russia, from many other countries around the world. So the idea that nobody's blown the whistle or exposed Apollo is just not, it's nonsense. They have. The Russians specifically have exposed Apollo for what it is: fraud, fake, and fiction. Let's not get overexcited about it. People want to believe it happened because it makes them feel good. It's a great achievement if it had happened. But we've now demonstrated, I think, beyond any reasonable doubt, that it was faked. There's so much information about it. NASA are not going to come up with any of that information because it will spoil their income stream. Because Apollo was financed through the US Congress using American taxpayers' dollars, which is why all the photographs allegedly taken on the moon are copyright free. They've already been paid for. Anyway, Apollo 13, a fake. A wonderful story, by the way, that film, Apollo 13, was all filmed here on Earth. None of it was filmed in space. But we see astronauts floating through the capsule. Was that filmed in the Vomit Comet?
Correct.
Yes, it was.
There we go.
Yes, it
It
was.
almost certainly was.
Oh,
Was
by
that
the way, Marcus, you know what I found? Remember, I found that one film of them actually training in the LEM in the Vomit Comet. They had a full mock-up of the LEM in that Vomit Comet, and they were practicing egressing from that. They were going in and out of that hatch, practicing that.
Yep, that's what they would do. It's a logical thing to do if you're going to practice going somewhere you've never been before. You'll practice as close to the environment you expect to find as you can. The Vomit Comet was a very good way of doing it. So let's not fool ourselves that Apollo 13 was anything other than a faked landing. Well, not a fake landing. The landing was real. But what was the hell was a command module doing floating in the Bay of Biscay. It had not been reported missing.
But these people are saying that it was that boilerplate. What was it? Boilerplate 1207 or something like that?
Yes, some people say that was a boilerplate, BP boilerplate 1227. It was used as a practice.
But nobody knows how it got there. That's the whole point of this. What happened? Did they push it off of a ship and then go and practice with it and say, oh, well, we're just going to leave it behind. We have 3 or 4 more of them, because they were producing those boilerplates off an assembly line. I have a video showing many of them being pushed off that assembly line. It was the same thing. What did they do? Did they do it like they did with the Mercury capsule and drop it out of a plane to test it with the parachutes? Did it land in the ocean? Did the boilerplate get pushed off of a ship? What? They won't tell you that. That's the whole problem. And so what? It's a boilerplate. Yeah, it's a boilerplate. Sure, we all know that. But how did it get there? How did a boilerplate get there?
Yeah, because if it had floated across the Atlantic, which is possible, if it had floated across it, it would have taken several weeks to do that. It would flow the Gulf Stream up towards Britain.
And why weren't there any barnacles on it?
There were no barnacles on it. There was no growth on it at all. It hadn't been in the water very long, but it had not been reported missing. I mean, these things weigh about 5 tons. It would be a danger to shipping if somebody had hit it. But you'd think if it had fallen off the side of a ship, they'd have noticed that it had gone, and they'd say, oh, look, we've lost it. We better report it so that people don't bump into it.
So how many days after Apollo 13 launched did they find that boilerplate?
1 day.
Oh, wow.
1 day after the official launch of Apollo 13, the Soviet Navy found it floating in the Bay of Biscay, hauled it on board, took it back to their base at Murmansk, handed it over to America 6 months later.
So wait a minute. So these astronauts that were practicing in that boilerplate, because that's what they did, they went in and out of it. They went on to those little dinghies. They were, practicing all that. Well, why would that be out there? Why would they need to practice anything when that was being launched? Those 3 guys are supposed to be in that capsule on their way to the moon. And yet they have another capsule out there training Apollo 14. Is that what was going on out there? And then they just happened to lose that boilerplate at the same time? No, those astronauts would have been there watching that launch.
Yeah, of course they would.
All would have been watching that launch. They're not going to be out training. So again, I ask, how did that capsule get there on that day? That's what makes no sense.
Yeah. That has to be answered. If it was for real, it has to be answered. How did that capsule, whether it's a boilerplate or the official Apollo 13 capsule, how did it get into the Bay of Biscay the day after the official launch of Apollo 13? Now,
I'm looking at this article here regarding the boilerplate 1277. According to this, that this boilerplate was used to train splashdown recoveries training. Okay, yeah. And they say it went missing in early 1969, which that's interesting because if you mentioned that there was no barnacles or anything like that on the capsule that they recovered. So if it went missing, if this was the same capsule, this went missing in early 1969. So that's what, May, April, something like that. So there would have been quite a while for plenty of time for barnacles to have collected on it. But there was nothing found on the capsule that the Soviets fished out of the water.
No, nothing at all. You see it being pulled out of the water, and there's no barnacles, seaweed, or growth you'd expect on any craft that has spent several weeks in the water.
No, but the boilerplate, what's interesting is that the door is different. The hatch is completely different on the boilerplate than it is on the actual capsules. So that's another, thing. Like, I get it. It's not like you're saying that it's the same capsule that we're talking about. That's not the point. The boilerplates were actually manufactured to sit on top of that rocket. That they were the same dimension. Let's put it that way. But the doors were different. The hatch was different. And there was no windows in a lot of those boilerplates. Like the one that's in Michigan, that has no windows in it.
No,
and the hatch is different. It's completely different. But the point is what was that boilerplate doing there when those guys were all the astronauts, Apollo 14, 15, whatever, they're in training? They're not going to be training in a boilerplate out in the middle of the ocean when Apollo 13 is launching. And that's the whole thing. That's what really doesn't make sense. So why is it there? I mean, that's crazy.
It is. And there's been no explanation offered.
Because if it would have showed up maybe, if they would have found it a month later or something like that, or even a few days before the launch, but this is so strange that they just happened to find that the next day.
Yeah.
According to just a further clarification from that article I mentioned, it says here that when it went missing in 1969, early 1969, it was during the trip. Well, it was said there was a possible connection with the Apollo 9 training. So in other words, when they would have lost this capsule in early 1969, they would have been training the Apollo 9 crew.
It's possible, yeah, but it still hadn't been reported missing. And
But the Apollo 9 crew, if they were training the Apollo 9 crew, then the capsule wouldn't have been out in that. It's like I just don't get it.
Well, like I said, this particular boilerplate was for splashdown and recovery training. So if it had gone missing, it would have had to have been gone missing out and stuff like that. But like I said, like Marcus said, rather there was no barnacles or anything like that on the capsule that the Soviets recovered. And so if this was indeed that missing boilerplate, and we reckon it would have been covered in all this seaweed and whatnot, all the sea life collecting onto it.
Yep. But no explanation has ever been offered for why that capsule was floating in the Bay of Biscay. Whether it's a boilerplate or the official Apollo 13 capsule makes no difference.
And then what about that other fellow that was claiming that there was a capsule or that they were training in England?
Well,
you remember the last stream we had? We had one guy on there that was claiming that. Is that true?
No, there's no record at all of any astronaut training in the UK using a boilerplate or using anything. They didn't train in the UK. And the UK were not involved in the recovery either. They would have assisted if asked. But there was no record. There's no record at all of any NASA astronauts training anywhere near the UK. They trained in Florida. They trained in Houston. They trained in Hawaii, trained in Iceland. But there's no record of anything happening in the UK. So that's just a desperate explanation trying to resolve this particular problem. Nobody's solved it yet. It's been public knowledge for some time. It's been posted on the ALDIS website for several years now. Both the Russian explanation for what happened and the official explanation, or the write-up by Mary Bennett, which is a very good edit of the original story.
So this capsule then, or this boilerplate then, was probably dropped off a boat, off a ship they were going to practice, let's say.
Yeah.
But how did it, now this is the Atlantic Ocean we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
They were practicing, it was the Atlantic, yeah. So if you follow the Atlantic Ocean all the way down, this is what doesn't really make a lot of sense. Did that capsule actually float all the way down into the Bay of Biscay by itself? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, pigs might fly too.
Yeah, though that's just it.
Yeah. Extraordinary story. I mean, that's Apollo 13. Something definitely happened to Apollo 13, which is why there was at least 18 months delay before Apollo 14. The golf shot.
Well, first of all, people would have to believe that NASA could build something that would float for that long.
That's a good point.
I mean, come on. You've seen them do the test where they're dropping it into a pool.
Yeah.
Right, just off a thing, and the hull collapses when it hits the water. when they're testing it to see how much of a splashdown it can take, and the hull actually collapses when they're putting it in. They're only dropping it from about 15 feet.
Oh, that one test, on that crane, they swung, it swung down, and the whole bottom of it just crunched right in.
Yeah, that's the same one you see the astronauts in the swimming pool with their spacesuits on, having a beer. And that's a real shot. That's on the journal site. You can pull that one up on. But
and then we're talking, and then what was another thing that was interesting that this one fella brought up here about the dust. Now, remember we were looking at the Apollo 16 rover, and we were looking at the dust. Well, when the dust is kicked out by the tires, they're sieves. So when all that regolith is being grinded out by those tires, it's going out in waves. But why does it all of a sudden just stop? And the other thing is that if this dust levitation is a real thing, like the physicists say it is, I've shown the diagrams many times. So as long as the sun is striking that dust, and we're talking the fine stuff that rover's kicking out, the very end trails of it is very, very fine. If that was real, that dust would be floating, and it would keep going up and up and up. And it would end up right up in the, 20 miles above the moon, because I've shown pictures of that where you can actually see it all the way around the moon.
Yeah.
Dust levitating. And the only way it's coming back down again is when the sun goes down, when the moon rotates around and is out of the sun's rays. So I don't understand how that dust is just falling back down again. Even the fine stuff. See that, and that doesn't make sense. And it looks like it's striking something.
Yeah, it's hitting the atmosphere. The dust you see in the photographs is NASA's simulated regolith. So any picture you see is not the lunar surface. The dust, the cosmic dust that would be on the lunar surface would be much finer than that. Okay, if you disturbed it, it would be like, to give an example on how it would react, would be as if you put some dirt into some water and you stirred it around, and it's going to be suspended in the water for a long time before it settles back out. That's the kind of dust we're talking about. It's going to react more like that. And that photoelectric charge that's in there is going to make it levitate. And it's going to be up there from the second they touch down. It would just be a cloud around the vehicle. Okay, there's no wind to blow it away. Okay, but what you see in the photographs, what you see in the videos is on Earth, and it's simulated regolith, and it's not nearly as fine. There isn't the fine cosmic dust in being displayed in what they developed. That's just, you're just in a gravel and sand pit. That's all you're in, right? With bunches of metal, garbage sticking out of it everywhere. Pop cans, beer cans, for Christ's sakes. I mean, come on.
There's one thing about the whole levitating dust that I found quite interesting, right? With all you've seen the pictures from Surveyor and whatnot of the dust rising above the horizon, right? That's from all the plasma photoelectric effect and everything. You'd think with all the dust rising and falling back down to the earth, like you would think over time that would erase all the footprints that they supposedly left on the moon. Yet we see the footprints in the lunar orbiter, the lunar reconnaissance orbiter photos. Which
absolutely, and it would cover the laser reflector as well.
I just noticed this
after the first cycle, as the sun goes on and off within 30 days, the dust is going to fall back down. It's going to cover the laser reflectors up there, and there's no way you're going to get a return signal from anything.
Yeah.
I just noticed this one comment here by Sonic Jet. I think all the Apollo detectives are CIA disinformation agents. If that's the case, where's my paycheck? Where's my paycheck?
CIA in Canada?
Australia too. You must have been confused with
Show me
Asians
the
or
money.
something.
Show me the money.
Yeah, they obviously haven't sent me the check yet. I've been waiting for it.
Oh,
I could
my
use
Lord.
it. Come on, guys. Let's have it. Let's have it.
You're going to be
Let's
waiting
have
for
that
that
bloody
check.
check.
Yeah, you're going to be waiting for that check as long as you had for the reply from NASA, and it's been 25 years. No, 30 years this year.
Which will I receive first? The paycheck from the CIA or ASIS or whoever, or will I receive the paycheck from that flat earther who still owes me money? Which will arrive first? All place your bets in the comments.
Robert, why don't you share the screen with that cue card?
Yes, yeah.
Stuff, and we'll go back to the gloves and the vacuum and everything else and how you can't squeeze it. Of course, the Prada gloves, they're going to work perfectly, right? Because Prada made them. But here's an example of the gloves working flawlessly because Cernan, of course, wrote on the Apollo 17, the final thing. He stood at the bottom of the ladder and wrote on the cue cards with a pen. You know, one of those space pens? You know, the kind you can write upside down, except they can't handle a vacuum, right? They're only good for 12,000 feet. Well, you know.
Just why the rush.
Can you share that image?
I'm just having. No, I can't get that up there. It won't. I'll try it. I'll see if it will or not. Oh, there it is. Did it show? Is it show now?
I didn't say anything yet.
Here Man, is this the one? Here Man completed his first exploration of the moon, December 1972 AD. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind.
You didn't get to share it.
Oh.
Yeah. Just hit the present and away we go.
No, it's I am. It's blank.
We don't see anything sharing at all.
No, okay, it won't come up then. It's blank. Yeah. For some reason, it just won't show.
Oh, just to complete the story of the. Just to complete the story of the lunar rover, in that film Apollo 16, the Grand Prix they called it, where you see the lunar rover disappearing off into the distance, coming back with great clumps of dirt being thrown off its wheels. That was a radio-controlled model. It's about 12 inches long. And you'll notice it's a radio-controlled model because it's a mannequin sitting in the seat, and his arms do not move as they go over bumps. His arm just stays level. His left arm, the right arm is allegedly holding the control stick in the center, but his left arm is just like that. And it stays like that the whole time. Nobody would drive any vehicle with their left arm up there. They'd have it down on their knee. That's the normal way to drive. So it's a radio-controlled model on a relatively small set, probably filmed outdoors, probably near Cannon Air Force Base. So the idea that is a film of the real lunar rover is just nonsense.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is one way they could have done it. You know, or another way they could have done it is to just have a guy go and sit in the rover and go, and then use a high-speed camera, and then you slow it down, and bingo, now you have the beautiful, slow, nice, bumpy, you know. Yeah, it's really something how these guys, you know, they can do it. But yeah, what I don't understand is at the beginning, when I put it in the editor, the guy's arm starts in the up position.
Yeah.
And then they make a cut. Yeah. And then they make a cut, and then it goes right down, and you don't see the in-between. It just goes right up, like in the Heil Hitler position. You know, he's got his arm right up above his head. Yep. And then it cuts. And then when they show it again, his arm's down.
Yep, exactly.
That's strange to me.
Why would like cut it right there? I would just like to add that I've seen a few videos of remote control cars being driven out in the desert and stuff where they're kicking up all the desert sand. It looks a great deal like what we see in the Grand Prix video.
Oh yeah. And by the way, Marcus, did you see that one I showed you of that one fellow that has these RCs?
Yep.
What do you call it? Isn't that incredible? Radio controlled models. When I first saw that, and he put the engine noise behind it, and he
Yep.
was doing all these flips. What do you call those things, Scott?
What, the radio controlled?
Yeah, remember that fellow on YouTube has that channel where he does all those flips with that buggy?
Yeah, he's doing monster trucks.
That's a monster trucks. You would swear that this is the real thing. He's got the speed. He uses a high-speed camera. He has the frame rate exact, the dust, the sound, everything.
Ramps,
I couldn't believe it.
background images, everything is perfect.
And the perspective, yeah,
the camera down, they look like the real thing.
Cars, he has cars in the background. He has the roads, where you can see the cars going along the roads. He's got the perspective 100% down, and I mean it. You just can't believe that this is not a real truck. The only thing that got me was when the body flew off of it. Then you could see, oh, there's nobody in there. Okay, well that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, now you could see how these guys could do it with those high-speed cameras were. That's how they did Star Wars. That's how they did all these explosions. That's how they do all these tricks. So if you have a remote controlled car just like that, there's your Apollo set right there.
Yeah. And anybody who wants to see the detail of how Apollo films and photographs were created, go to the Apollo Detectives site and look for the film called Make Believe Smoke and Mirrors, which is the Hollywood phrase for how they did a lot of stuff, smoke and mirrors, because that's what it was done. Different frame rates, different film sizes from 70 mil to 16 mil, using an optical printer to create another film, which we've seen as the Apollo record. It was all created. It was done very sophisticatedly. It was almost certainly done at Lookout Mountain Laboratories, which is an RAF, US Air Force film laboratory in Laurel Canyon, north of Los Angeles. It's now a private house owned by Jared Leto, the film actor and singer. But in the late 60s, it was a US Air Force film laboratory, very well equipped. And most of the large sets were almost certainly filmed at Hangar 1 at Menlo Park. It's an airship hangar. It's still there today. You can see it on Google Maps if you look hard enough.
That could be where they did it. You
Yeah.
never know. It's big enough
Well, they
to have that
done a
going.
lot of video there for sure.
Yeah. And this is the other thing. This is another good question is why didn't they wave? Nicholas Short, he says, why didn't the guy wave? You know how you always wave to the camera? You know how the astronauts are always waving, or not waving, but they're always making silly things at the camera and they're doing silly things. Why didn't they wave? Why didn't he wave just once to the camera?
Yeah.
Apollo 16 in the rover. He could have waved at least once. That's the thing you do, isn't it? Wave to the camera.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nicholas. Well done.
Well,
they
similar
were very good
incident when I
actors.
was actually filming. I was at a convention where Paul Fennick from Fat Pizza was appearing. I was getting some video shots of him he was riding around on a bike. As he came past the camera, he did playfully flipped at the camera, as he was a comedian. He was trying to knock it over and stuff. You would think that would be his equivalent to a waving at the camera. You'd think the astronauts would have done something similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I brought up with Mr. Marcus last weekend was how interesting it is that you often hear that we know more about space than we do about the depths of our ocean.
Yep.
And Marcus brought up a great point that, our oceans aren't very deep and we don't have equipment to traverse the depths of our own ocean.
Yeah.
But yet we made it to the moon allegedly in the 1960s.
Yeah, and we haven't been back, have we?
Yeah, but we can't even get to the bottom of our oceans, in our backyards. It's very funny when you think about it.
Yeah. deepest part of the ocean is the Mariana Trench, which is 7 miles deep, we're told. It's about 35,000 feet.
And we
It's
can't
deeper.
get there because of the pressure and all this stuff.
Yeah, and the
We made it
pressure.
to space.
Yeah, where there's no pressure.
Yeah. It's
Well, you
pretty
see, the
laughable.
problem is in this day and age is people grow up and they see the technology that we have, so they don't understand what a computer in the 1960s was. They simply don't understand that, right? Because they have phones that are just millions of times more capable and faster. You can't even understand how fast. I remember in grade 9, I had a calculator, the very first one, and it was solar powered. Had little solar panels on it and stuff like that. And if you put a square root in, and it had 5 digits on each side of it to put a square root in, you could go have a smoke and come back and still wait for the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the type of technology. Now, we have today supercomputers to work out all of the calculations that it needs to take into account the rotational spin of the Earth, the speed the Earth is moving at in relationship to the sun, in relationship to the moon, right? And the orbital path and the calculations on how long it's going to take you to get to the moon, so that you could actually achieve an orbital path 60 miles from the surface of the moon, right? And continuously recalculating that, because your speed isn't going to be exact, right? Things are going to happen. You also have to calculate in any other forces that are out there, because depending on where the sun, you are in position to the sun, to the moon, to whatever, right? You have to calculate all those gravitational forces. We have supercomputers that take months to do those calculations out. These guys apparently did it with slide rules.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, because there's no way a computer, when you had swipe cards going in, right, and you had read-only core, the wire core memory, okay, that played like the way they operate, if anybody really wants to understand, is take an old jukebox and you punch in the number for the song you want to play, and it swings around, picks up the LP, the little vinyl disc, and puts it on and plays it. And that's all it's going to do. It's going to play it exactly at the same speed, and you listen to that song. That's what this memory is. And when you want to try, and when you want to go into a different song or the same on their computer program, is you reset it and hold it for 15 seconds, and then you can punch the next number in, right? And it comes up, and it has to load that read-only memory. It's not interacting. There's no interaction. Okay. You tell these people today, okay, you don't have a microphone on your computer, you don't have a keyboard, and you don't have a screen. Okay, you don't have a screen. You certainly don't have a touch screen. Ask these people how they did it. Like, go to the dollar store and buy a little cheapy pocket calculator and work with it, and see if you can do the calculations to get to the moon. That's how impossible it was in 1969. And if you think that's impossible, take a 1969 Volkswagen and see if you can win the Daytona 500 with it. Okay, this is a stock machine. See if you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll even allow you to add Bluetooth to it.
And also take that same VW Beetle, which is about the same internal volume as the lunar lander had, and put 3 guys in it. Yeah, just try putting a spacesuit on inside a car, any car.
Try and change your diapers. Never mind anything else.
No, 160.
I have mentioned that before. You have to be
really good buddies. To wear those when you go out in EVA.
You have to be really good buddies. If you're going to be sitting in a vehicle like that, and they didn't have Depends that went on there. Apparently, they taped these on each other, these diapers on each other. So they would have had to clean each other up. And I mean, if you're able to do that, you're going to, like, a bunch of guys hanging around. I don't care what you're doing. The only thing you can do is make jokes about it. And the other thing I said is when you wake up in the morning, surprise, there's going to be some morning wood. There's going to be a conversation about that. Okay. There's nothing you can do about it. These guys were healthy American men. Okay. There's going to be a joke. It's got to be in the transcript somewhere because everything was recorded. Every second was recorded. All of these events would have had to happen because they're gone for 12 days. Okay. You can't sit there and say, well, we took a pill and it's not going to happen today. Right. And not only that, if you're in space, if you're in zero gravity, because of the circulation of the blood system, it's going to be a little grander than normal. You're liable to comment on that too. Like, think about it. These things, this is the reality of what would have happened if they actually did this, right? Those conversations would have to happen. Okay. I can't imagine just ignoring the fact that you're changing, this diaper, and it's not going to be the first time you're going to do it. You're gone for 12 days.
You're taking buddy poops, and it's not on the written record.
Yeah, but don't forget
what is going on.
They're using that to urinate as well when they're in that suit.
Yeah.
All of those things have to be there. That's what's missing in the transcript. And there's so much missing in the transcript. Just take a look at the takeoff from the lunar surface. The calculations that have to happen. Okay, the conversation that's going to happen with the guy that's orbiting. And don't forget, they didn't even talk to him for 3 days in 15, 16, and 17. Completely missed it. The guy that wrote the script just absolutely screwed up there. They were so focused on getting the shots from their set to make it look like they were on the moon. They completely forgot about the guy orbiting. For 3 days straight, impossible.
Yep.
Absolutely impossible. It's not in the transcript. They can't add it to the transcript. No way. Every second is accounted for, so they can't add it.
And it looks like you just got a new fan, Scott.
From a psychopath that keeps clinging on here, desperately trying to get attention. Go do your video. Go get your 23 views, Phase.
Freaking knucklehead. That's awesome. I feel guilty because I know someone just put a comment that it's 2:20 in Scotland, which is 2:20 in Marcus Allen's neck of the woods.
Yes, we better wrap things up for Marcus.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
No, I know, sir. But
you can keep going, Marcus. We just feel bad.
You love it that much.
What was it? 4 hours we did last time, Woozy?
Yeah. Mr. Allen and I did 4 hours, and we probably could have done another 4 hours easily.
I know.
We were on a roll.
I know. We'll try and pick a better time of day for Marcus to run this.
I chose this time because I didn't realize.
Of course, for Garrow,
I had to say that it's 1:23 p.m. my time right now.
So it's perfect time for Jara, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's okay for myself and Wheezy and stuff like that, right? And it's good for Robert as well, right?
It's Mr. Allen that we're worried about.
I think we should wrap it up. We've said our piece tonight.
We'll definitely let's try to see if we can schedule for a month's time from now.
Yeah, sure.
Get together and do another one for sure.
Yeah, that'd be good. So get some good questions for us, guys. I know there are several hundred out there who are listening in. You're interested enough in Apollo to want to hear what we've got to say. We'd like to hear what you've got to say. We've had some very good comments already.
Yeah, we had about 150 viewers. Think about it. Having a small little auditorium with 150 people listening to us the entire time, that's pretty awesome.
We peaked at 86.
Yeah, and that's on your
mean,
channels.
Yeah.
And with my audience on scattered about different platforms. Plus, I put these on my Spotify and my, Apple podcast players, and those get many downloads, throughout the week. So yeah, we will probably have a few thousand folks by the end of the week listening to this conversation. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. I want to thank all the people that follow the Apollo Detectives, that follow my channel, channels, I suppose you can say. You guys make this possible. You guys want to hear this. You guys want to listen to these conversations, and we put them on, and you guys show up, and so we are indebted to you.
One thing, can you just, Jara sent you a link there. Can you just show that? That's to Jara's new website.
Yeah, I got it here. 1 second. I will share it. And I also have your guys' YouTube channel as well as the Alice website on the description. So if anyone is interested, make sure you look at that description there. Okay, there we go, jerrywhite.com. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
There's my new website to promote my book that's coming out, Trojan Smirch, a Sid Tanner thriller. Got a new website for it. You'll find blog articles I've written about how this book can be written and any new updates. You've got a excerpt of the actual book itself. And what else do we have? We have obviously the typical stuff, author bio. And so it's the start of a new era, I hope. If you're on the actual book page, there's about the author. Good picture. You got... if you go to the main page, you'll see it. You go to the main page here for a second. You scroll down, and you'll see everything that's you got the trailer, little info on the pro tag. You got usual updates, I guess, and
RoboCop.
Yeah. It's actually a suit that he's wearing.
That shields from radiation?
Well, it shields him from bullets. His name is Tanner. They call him Sid Tanner.
Well, it will probably shield better than the Apollo suit.
Yeah.
Most likely. Most likely.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And also,
any last words, gentlemen?
Yeah, don't forget Nexus Magazine. Check it out.
Magazine. Yes.
World's leading alternative news magazine. Hidden history, future science, alternative health, UFOs, conspiracies, and a bit of politics.
Yeah, the one on the crop circles was really interesting.
Yeah, now we did a big article on crop circles written by Andy Thomas, who's an expert on the subject. There we go.
Scott.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So you go to Barnes and
Did you say Andy Thomas?
Yeah,
the astronaut, or I think it was somebody else.
No, his name's Andy Thomas. He's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay. In Australia, we have a national hero as well, Andy Thomas, the Australian astronaut. So,
right. Okay. No, it's not him. Not him. or maybe he's the guy making the crop circles from space. Anyway, it's an interesting subject, crop circles. There's a lot more to be discovered. They weren't just made by a couple of old men with planks. Check out some of the pictures of this year's crop circles. They're really sophisticated designs. And if you think they were made by people tipping out the pub at night, in the UK, we only have 5 hours of darkness during the summer. And you then take those designs and do it blindfold and make no mistakes. That's how hard they are to do.
But you know, one thing I found interesting about that, though, when I was reading that article, was that one of those ones, it was very extremely complicated. That was the one when it was made with diamonds.
Yeah.
That looked like petals. And I believe that one was the one that was made overnight, and it was raining for 4 days straight.
Yeah.
So if that, can you imagine people in the mud, up to your knees in mud, making that overnight?
No, it's not. It's done by some technology we don't yet fully understand. Same way to the pyramids. We don't understand how they were built, no matter how much it's been investigated.
We need to do another show, Mr. Marcus, and Scott could join us as well. It looks like he's been going down those rabbit holes as well. So that'd be a fun show we could hopefully plan soon.
Yeah, and also shout out to Randy Walsh. He's doing some very good work.
Yes,
definitely
Awesome
check
guy.
out his site.
What about Ben and Neil? Would they be interested in joining as well?
Say again?
Ben and Neil, would they be interested in joining as well?
Yeah, Ben Emlyn Jones.
Yep.
And Neil Peel. Who are the other guys around who are doing it? I think Taffy's a little bit ill at the moment. I understand he's recently had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So he's been working too hard again.
I only chatted to him just after he got back from the hospital last week.
All right.
And I haven't seen him online since.
Okay.
I've even left messages on there that he would pick up. When I made that connection, I put your contact card on so you could call him. He hasn't been there to even see that.
All right.
So
interesting question.
He might have had a little recurring problem.
It's possible, yeah.
Because like when I saw him, I saw he wasn't well. He really, really got beat up over that little heart attack he had.
Yes, it's not good to have heart attacks. I mean, you only got one heart.
You don't recover.
No.
You don't recover. Anyway, guys.
Yeah.
Just interesting question from user unknown. Does Marcus support the farmers and Clarkson? That's the farmers who are getting very, very upset in the UK. And Jeremy Clarkson, who is also a farmer, was at a big protest meeting in London. Yes, I do support what they do. I think they've been treated very badly.
I have a comment I'd like to respond to as well. I just noticed this Max Spock fellow. He writes, Smirsh Spock, just thinking. Believe it or not, I've never seen an episode of Star Trek. But just to clarify, if you actually go into my website, jarrowhite.com, you'll find a blog article in which I explain how the organization SMERSH, it recently came back into existence after I had written my book. SMERSH was an intelligence agency in the Soviet Union. The mission was to snuff out Soviet defectors and Nazi spies during the war. It famously became the antagonists in James Bond, in Influence James Bond series. But the idea of SMERSH still existing after the World War II was just that, was an idea. And so imagine my surprise when after my Trojan SMERSH gets accepted for publication, I learned that SMERSH has been resurrected as part of their invasion of Ukraine. I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope the people in Ukraine are going to be safe.
Obviously, they're taking note of what you're writing about.
Yeah. SMERSH, I should mention, it's a portmanteau of the phrase Smert Spionem, which means death to spies in Russian.
Yes. Yeah, that book's got all the answers to the objections to Apollo being faked. So you can get it from Amazon.
And you can get an autograph too.
You get it autographed too. Yeah, you have to.
Heck yeah. Write
to me. I'll autograph it and send you the copy.
Oh, by the way, Marcus, is Nexus Magazine on Kindle? I don't believe so. I believe it's just that website. Nexus has its own website, I believe, right?
Yeah, it does. nexusmagazine.com.
But can you read it on Kindle?
As far as I know, you can get a digital version of it if you want to do it that way.
All right. Just a question that one of the subs had.
Beautiful.
Somebody just asked me a question, real quick one. Quick question, give us the Powerball lotto numbers. Okay. 1, 10, 19, 23, 26, 28.
You want 50% of the winnings for that, right?
Yeah.
Just FYI, the Powerball right now is 100 million.
Yeah, thanks, Missy.
Sheesh.
We'll enjoy our weekend. Anyway,
Yeah, she's from Manchester.
Manchester. That's good.
Yeah, that's where she's
okay.
from.
Glad people in the UK are still up at this time.
Still up. We've got a few.
Following my lead, obviously. That's great.
Shout out to the UK folk for sure. Staying up this late.
Good guys in the UK.
Yeah.
Government's not particularly good at the moment, but most of the UK, some nice people here. And I'll tell you why we drive on the left as well, if you've got time. That's another story.
Yeah.
And why do you speak English in America? Why don't you speak French or Spanish or German?
Well, I heard that in England, why they drive on the other side or on the left side of the road was because of wasn't it something to do with sidewalks, and they loaded from the left side or something like that.
That's so you could wield your sword.
Oh.
When you're riding your horse, you could.
Yeah. Because England is a very small place compared to America or Australia or Canada. We're very small. The whole of the UK, by the way, the difference between the UK and Great Britain is the UK includes Northern Ireland. Great Britain's just Scotland, Wales, and England. That's the difference.
I disagree with user unknown.
What?
Does that include the Shetlands?
Yeah, it includes the Shetlands, but they aren't very big.
No, I know. Like, I can drive that in an afternoon here.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure in Australia, you drive that on a regular basis as far as 600 miles or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. 1,000 kilometers. Yeah. Do you realize you
Stop
can't
on a kangaroo, will you be there?
Do you realize it takes almost 14 hours just to drive across the southern part of Ontario?
Sheesh.
Right? Like from where I am, if you covered the entire length, it's probably 2 or 3 hours more.
Yeah, it takes 7 days to drive from my place to yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it would take me to get to the East Coast. That's only 1,500 miles, right? And to get to your place, Robert, that's about 1,800 miles that direction. And that's not even to the West Coast.
Nope.
Right? Because you're talking 30, what's Canada? 35, 3,600 miles across.
Yeah. And Great Britain is only about 700 miles from the very top of Scotland to the very bottom of the UK, very bottom of England. Yeah. It's a small place.
Yeah.
It would fit many times into Ontario or into
Texas.
Western Australia or into any of the states in America. I think the only state in America that's larger than the UK in land area is Oregon. Every other state in America is bigger than the UK.
Sheesh.
Which is why we all had to piss off, because we got fed up with living on a damp bunch of rocks off the west coast of Europe. So we set sail to warmer countries. And we thought, oh, look, we found Australia. That's nice. Plenty of land here.
Bloody well brought your tea with you, didn't you?
Yeah. I never thought I'd live to see the day Marcus Allen say, piss off.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you didn't hear him on my show last
You
week.
didn't hear him debate.
Oh,
Ah,
last weekend Mr. Marcus was on fire. He was dropping some bombs.
Yeah.
Some very colorful bombs as well.
I mean, things you weren't even aware of in America. Yeah,
I loved it.
we didn't even get to discuss Coral Castle, did we?
No.
No.
We
Oh,
need
no,
to.
that is an eerily interesting, that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coral Castle. Wow. You know, that little contraption that that was made to that little box that was sitting up on the top. Do you see one guy made a YouTube video and he made a Coral Castle himself? He put the whole thing together. He showed, well, he didn't make the whole thing, but he showed all of the equipment and all the wires, and the reason why he had all those wires strung around all over the place, and he had all these saws going, and it was just crazy how he showed how he built Coral Castle. I can't remember the guy's name now; it's just slipped my mind. But yeah, it was really that's a whole other topic. That
Yeah, we'll have to do that when we do our next episode.
How close is that to you, Easy?
Probably not more than 3 hours. I could get to any point in Florida in about
Lead
3 to
Scowling.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Was it Lead Scowling?
Lead Scallon.
Coral Castle?
I believe so.
Yeah, Ed Lee Scallon.
Yeah, Ed Lee Scowling, yeah.
Yeah.
And did it without any heavy equipment and took his secret to the grave, unfortunately.
Yeah, he did.
Well, look at the truck. I mean, the guy, remember they dropped the truck off? They dropped the lorry, a flatbed off. And he says, oh, don't worry about it all. It had the whole thing unloaded by the morning, that whole truck.
Yeah, and he was a little fella too, which is insane.
Yeah. Got a big brain.
Yeah.
Anyway, time to go, guys.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Exactly.
Okay,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Wheezy.
Thank you, guys.
See you next time.
Always a treat. Yeah, we'll have to do it
thanks a
again.
lot for having us on. And thanks to all of our subscribers, too. Thanks to all the fans of our channel, too, and of Wheezy's. And yeah, it was fantastic. We'll have to do this again next month.
We will.
Yes, sir.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen.
Take care, guys.
All right, then. Bye now.